OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
Right, it's bang on 7:30. It's Thursday morning. Does everybody know that Ireland are playing tonight? It's a very low-key build-up to an Ireland game, isn't it?
You'd have almost forgotten. Yeah, I heard it on the radio in the car this morning and I was like, oh yeah, Ireland are playing. Without Hannon, I guess, some of the lures taken away, but Martin Odegaard is still there. Some decent players in the Norway team. So
yeah, they're good.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see the Irish team as well. I think Stephen Kenny will put out a strong team because at the end of the day, results matter. I know the result of a friendly doesn't necessarily matter, but for his tenure it matters. So keep the results coming.
Yeah, Dan McDonald's making the point that every game there's a little bit of extra pressure on Stephen Kenny. There's also infighting on the board where the chairman of the board has written to the rest of the board and then it leaked, complaining about the leaks. He's like, we look like a pub team. Now, I'd say if you send that message out, you have a fair idea it's going to get made public.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe, well, I'm sure he sent it to everybody to make sure that everybody understands. So, look, it's an interesting time in Irish football.
It is.
This game tonight's relatively important. And
45,000 odd tickets sold.
Is it? Is there? Yeah.
Apparently. Which will be really, really good turnout if everyone shows up.
Great atmosphere.
Yeah.
You know.
Quality. 7:45 kick-off on a midweek. That's what people want.
Under lights. I'm telling you. Irish sport under lights. We like it.
Yeah. I'd like to see them get a win. You know, if they could get it. It's not, again, it's not about the result, but if they could beat Norway and beat Malta, all of a sudden we're like, yeah, all right, we're decent.
Yeah. And then as you keep talking about, you've got to remember who we're playing in the group.
True.
Look, the group is going to be interesting. Like, some of the best footballers in the world are definitely going to be coming to Dublin, and they won't not show up because it's friendly. They're going to show up because it's a qualifier. So I was thinking, do we want France to win this and kind of have a mad hangover? So that, like, what more mountains are there for them to climb?
Yeah. I can't see France winning the World Cup in any world.
Oh, we were talking to Ben Jacobs earlier in the week and he listed off all their defenders. You're like, well, that's pretty good.
Too many cooks spoil the broth.
Yeah, so the young midfielders need to come forward and establish themselves as like proper successors to N'Golo Kante.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe they'll be able to do that, maybe they won't, I don't know. But then they do have Mbappe, so you can bore your way to 1-0 the whole way through and win the World Cup. Many teams have done that.
A lot of people, I was speaking to a couple of people last night who thought England were maybe being underappreciated heading into this World Cup, that maybe they could do something. I don't subscribe to that theory whatsoever. I don't think they'll do much.
What's not much?
Well, like, I think they'll struggle against both the USA and Wales in the group. I'm not saying they won't get the results needed to progress to the last 16, but I think they'll struggle. Like
0-0, 1-0.
Potentially.
But that's enough to go through. That's 5 points.
Yeah, they'll beat Iran in the first game, and that's the way it's worked out for them nicely, having Iran, a bit of momentum, get the first win under your belt. But I can't see them doing much. Like, will they get to a quarter-final? I don't think so. Like,
well, that's a shocking failure if they don't.
That would be a failure, yeah, of course it would. I can just foresee some sort of English shock result. Like, not as big a shock or as seismic a shock as Iceland in the Euros in 2016, but something to that effect. Like, they don't have a better team than Denmark, for example.
They do.
Do you think so? I think Denmark would beat them on this occasion. They lost narrowly at Wembley in the semi-finals in the Euros last time out, but I just think if Denmark came up against England in this World Cup, not in Wembley, Denmark will beat them. Now, I don't know how the draw looks. They'll obviously ultimately reach if they both go far, but Denmark, I just have a feeling around. Brazil, I think, will probably win the tournament.
I think the bench that England have is really good if he uses it properly, and I do think there's potentially. So, look, England in tournaments have frequently gone in with a plan and then they've got punched in the mouth and then they've changed the plan and the change results in something significantly better. So I think there's a possibility that they end up with a diamond at some point and making use of their best players in their best positions.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that, like, it's mad that they haven't really tried to go back to a back four or something that allows more of their good attacking players in the side as opposed to piling up the defence with bad players. Well, you know, strategically, I have all these bad players, I'll have more of them in the team. I have all these good players, I'll have less of them in the team. You know, I understand balance and, you know, all that, and creation of space and what have you.
To be honest, my argument of England not doing well is probably based on those bad players not playing well. Like, there is a universe in which Harry Maguire
don't put them in the team,
plays the lights out though.
Yeah, or like reaches his level.
Well, yeah, of course, which probably isn't fantastic at the minute. But yeah, I think they should get more of those players into the team. Like the likes of Callum Wilson in previous tournaments mightn't have got too much game time for England, but like, why can't you play him? Try him out. Try him out one of the games.
It's late now. It's late to be trying stuff.
But it's confidence, isn't it, for strikers especially? If he's scoring goals, which he has been, throw him into the team.
Yeah, although you're taking Harry Kane out because.
Well, yeah.
Are they playing together? Maybe, and you go old school with wingers and lump the crosses in and see what happens.
Try something different.
You know, it's not very modern, but who knows? I do wonder what people want from Ireland tonight. I do wonder what the Kenny doubters and haters want to see happen tonight, and I do wonder what the here on Kenny FM. I wonder what we're supposed to look for. Anybody? I didn't get this week's memo about what we're supposed to.
No, I didn't get the letter. I honestly believe a lot of the Kenny haters at this stage just want him to fail miserably, like almost hoping that the team loses. And there's a lot of Kenny haters out there who will be in the comments straight away saying, "I know, I would never hope that the team loses." But secretly, I think a lot of people have an agenda. They want him out, and they're only friendly games. So if you're going to lose games without too much jeopardy, I guess it's these ones. So I don't know. I hope for the team's sake he gets a win, because I'm excited about this team still. Here goes the Kenny FM text. But I just think that when you look at the team on paper now, it's actually a lot better than it was 3 years ago. Well,
they've got a lot more caps and they've got a fluency around what they're trying to do, and you kind of see the ambition that they have. So let's wait and see exactly what it is that happens tonight. There's some talk of Evan Ferguson potentially getting some game time. Is that, or is it mooted?
Saw it in the back of the papers today. They were talking about, well, he probably won't start tonight, but there's a distinct chance he'll either come off the bench tonight or on Sunday against Malta. But just looking like Robbie Keane, as was pointed out in the papers, youngest Irish goal scorer in 1998 against Malta, ironically, in aged 18 years and 98 days. So Evan Ferguson tonight is 18 years and 29 days, and on Sunday is 18 years and 32 days. So wouldn't it be nice if he did it on Sunday against Malta, off the bench? Robbie Keane breaking his record against the exact same opposition. Apparently he's been playing unbelievably well in training this week, Evan Ferguson. Maybe not enough to be starting, but look, he's uncapped, so give him a bit of time. But I'm fascinated to see what he can do. He feels like a player, because he's a Premier League experience, feels like a player who can be just thrown in. This is a level at which he is going to be more than comfortable of. So yeah, Stephen Kennedy loves him, and apparently training wise, straight in there.
Yeah, might be interesting to see what a season in the Championship would do for him at this stage as well. I don't know, it's that same conversation we've been having about Caoimhín Kelleher as well, about the benefits of actually getting some game time or not. The other big news that happened in the last 24 hours, which I have to say was a bit of a bombshell, was that Michael Murphy has announced his retirement from intercounty football at the age of just 33. Now, Michael Murphy's 33 is probably a little bit older in terms of body and miles on the clock than most people, given that he was basically in the team since he was 18 and one of their most important players since he was 18.
Yeah.
And also a target for every hard man defender in every club match he's ever played and in every intercounty match he's ever played. He would have been targeted by the opposition's strongest man, toughest marker, biggest gouger. We've seen the type of treatment that was meted out to him by opposition defenders, and so I think the injuries probably had begun to take a toll, which is terrible, because I still think he's one of the most exciting, brilliant footballers to watch when he's in full flow. I think somebody put the video out yesterday of his goal in the All-Ireland final, and they were like, here's every Michael Murphy goal, and it was just that one, right? Where it's like super soaring over brilliant players, pulling it down, whacking it into the back of the net.
He was the best at that. Like, I know the word generational is probably used more than once in a generation, but like, he is one of those players. If you could sculpt a number 14 in a lab, Michael Murphy was probably it. Like, I know that a lot of people think he should be maybe midfield for Donegal over the years, but he was just an unbelievable full forward.
Well, like, the quality of midfielder he was very high, but the quality of inside forward he was off the charts, and it's just that they didn't have a team good enough to be able to just play him in one position. And again, that's one of those things where it's like, if he'd played 14 in every match for every minute of every match, we'd be like, wow, that was the greatest full forward of all time.
Yeah, and he's one of those lads who, in the dressing room from a young age, seemed like he was one of the leaders. Like, I think Ian McGee pointed out he was playing championship at 17, which just isn't allowed anymore. Won an Ulster title at 22, Sam at 23, he was captain in Donegal from 2011. Like, just one of those lads. And by the way, sponsoring the Donegal Club Championship from his mid-20s, which has just been incredible.
I definitely remember watching a game on Satanta one Saturday or Sunday when they were starting up the doing their version of the club, and the broadcast was sponsored by Michael Murphy Sports, and I'm fairly sure it was a county semi-final or final, and he was man of the match, which was sponsored by Michael Murphy. So Michael Murphy was the man of the match in the Michael Murphy Championship on the broadcast, sponsored by, it's like, wow.
I think Brendan Devaney pointed out once, this debate is he Donegal's greatest player ever? And Devaney said if you cut him in half, he'd be number 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Like, he's just one of those. And by the way, 3 All-Stars, like, it seems a crying shame, because that's nowhere near as many All-Stars as he should have got.
Yeah, and the other thing about this, right, and I know Carl Lacey was sensational the year they won the All-Ireland, but I think that Michael Murphy was probably the footballer of the year. It's like, Lacey was sensational, but there is kind of these awards at the end of someone's career, you're like, oh, that was a bit of an oversight, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's only when you look back.
We just assumed that if we had plenty of opportunity to give him the award again, because like they're going to win another one. But
yeah. He young footballer of the year in 2009, at least he got one of those honours. But I mean, yeah, he probably should have been in 2012. Not to take it off Carl Lacey, but I mean, some of the scores that have been doing the rounds on social media since, like, even there was the point against or for DCU in the Sigerson where he dummies Rory O'Carroll and just kicks the ball over his head, and then with the outside of his right foot just kicks it. It was just ridiculous. Something you wouldn't even think of trying. And obviously the goal for Donegal, even the famous Kevin Cassidy point against your own Kildare in 2014, like, there was the moment you'd almost forget that Murphy wins the ball on the sideline, 20 seconds beforehand, somehow keeps the ball in play, keeps it past a couple of Kildare defenders and manages to recycle the ball.
I think he'd been badly injured in that game, if memory serves. That we were like, oh, it's great, Murphy's injured, we're going to win this now. And then they just kept him on, and it went in, like, that's deep, that's like the last seconds of extra time.
Yeah.
And a game that has been absolutely frantic, and that was like the McGeaney levels of Kildare fitness that Kildare had.
That's right.
I'm fairly sure, like, he was pretty much on one leg and was still able to do something that was critical at the last second.
Yeah, literally after so many minutes.
I might be wrong about that, maybe somebody will correct me, but I'm fairly certain that, like, again, he'd been banged up.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, you've got to go again next week because we've got nobody else.
Yeah, and he was banged up, as you said, every game. He was a target, and like McGee points out to him, and McGee says that he's a good friend of his. He speaks to him quite often, and he was very surprised by the news. So clearly, it hadn't been really mooted in Donegal. Now, he did apparently talk to the players in the dressing room after the Ulster final, I guess it was, in Clonasla, or no, it would have been the Armagh qualifier, where he said, no matter what happens from now on, Donegal will always go on. So it was kind of, those were words maybe that were kind of hinting at the way he was thinking, Michael Murphy. But there was a great story from Gord Manning in the Irish Times as well today, where he talks about Michael Murphy's character, and he said he was named man of the match by TG Carr in Donegal's win over Tyrone. This was late May of last year. Finished the interview, and then he walked towards the cameraman, who's Brendan O'Donnell, and Brendan's brother Michael Jack O'Donnell. A lot of people in Donegal will be familiar with Michael Jack, well-known photographer. He had passed away at the start of May, so that earlier that month of May 2021. Michael Murphy got to know him over the years. I saw him tweeting about him even around that time as well. But he just walked over to Brendan, the brother, who was the cameraman for TG Carr that day, handed him the Man of the Match award and said it was for his brother. And like, just little things like that you're like, right, these stories nearly only come out when a player has retired, but he was an incredible man as well as a footballer. So probably Donegal's greatest ever footballer, I'd say. Mark
Dunning says Murphy didn't even start that night versus Kildare. He came on as a sub after approximately 25 minutes, so obviously he was carrying an injury, and then at the very end of the game he's still able to do something. Keane Johnson sent us a lot of stuff before we came on air. 177 appearances for Donegal, 77 championship in 16 seasons, 5 Ulster titles and an All-Ireland. Before he made his debut in 2007, how many Ulster titles do you think Donegal won in their entire history? 5 Ulster titles and 1 All-Ireland. Right. Exactly the same.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe it's a coincidence, Michael Murphy. Okay, fair enough. They obviously, McGuinness arrived and they came and they stole and they did, change the game. But like, I'd say McGuinness was inspired to get involved by like, okay, it's a good crop coming, give me that guy. Like, people forget too that Murphy missed the penalty against the Dubs in the under-21. That was not on the final. Was that Parnell Park? That would have won the game. So like, and I'd say that disappointment burned, absolutely burned, to the point where they were like, I still think the best game of football I've ever been at was Donegal beating Dublin, because that was the swashbuckling Dublin where Paul Flynn was like, we thought we were going to save football, you know, because they were like, well, it's grim up north. Someone has to play good attacking football. And the attacking football that Dubs played the first half that day was off the charts. Like, it was himself, Flynn and Connolly were kicking points from the 40, like metronomes, off either side. And you thought this is absolutely unstoppable. And then all of a sudden, Donegal are back in the game. And, like, it looks like rudimentary, it's long ball, but they were like, oh, we knew exactly their half-back line would push up, and if we just put a runner in behind.
There's a plan.
And so, I mean, the fact that all the goals look exactly the same, like they're templated, was sensational. And then it turns out that, you know, after the previous game, McGuinness had put a dossier down on the table and said, this is how we're going to beat the Dubs. I've been working on it for months. And I was like, what? This is amazing.
Here we go. Yeah. The start of something special. And, like, I don't think that's a coincidence, those stats. You reeled off the fact that Donegal won so much when he was there, because Glen Swilly, his club, like, they hadn't achieved much.
So Glen Swilly, who were for a long time Donegal junior and intermediate championship with Murphy on board, have won 3 senior titles.
Right, well, there you go. That's not a coincidence. Like,
won at Sigerson, captain Donegal at 21, captain the international rules team twice. There you go.
A man born to, like, he could have had a career in Australia as well, like, quite comfortably. Someone who can kick the ball like him and field the ball like him, like Michael Murphy. He could, and I'm sure he was approached over the years a number of times to go off to Oz, but Donegal was important to him, and being captain of Donegal, I think, from 2011 was hugely important to him. And that's a point that's been made in the papers this morning as well, that being captain in some counties isn't a massive deal. It's not really, there's not much made of it, but in Donegal it's a big deal. Like, whoever's picked as captain is...
Yeah, it's not definitely not appointed by the clubs, and it's not somebody who's just on the team in the first year.
Yeah.
If we'd won Ulster and the All-Ireland, or if we were put out in the first round, I had a feeling this year would be my last. What's required to represent Donegal for me is just full-on energy, the best energy you can possibly give it. I'm content to say I have the best for every single minute, and now I just struggle to see where I can get the energy to go on, to do everything that's required to get your body perfect, your strength and conditioning, to get to play at the highest level. The energy has to be there. I was so fortunate really to have got so long. I'm full duck or no dinner type of guy, and I've been doing it all. I can't go through a season unless I'm like that. People say you can manage your body in a way to get around that, but I can't. I have to be all in. Your Monday, Wednesday, Friday gym has to be there, as does your Tuesday, Thursday weekend training. You know, when you put it like that.
Fair enough. And he is, like, 33, you say, is relatively young for a player to retire, but yeah, he's done, what, 15 years, 16 years at the top with Donegal since 07. Like, he's given enough. And because he's one of those players, it's like a quarterback. Your career doesn't maybe go as long because they're going to get hits. He is one of those players who was pinpointed and targeted. Like, I remember the 3 Ulster finals in a row where Monaghan and Donegal played in 2013, 14 and 15. The only player I've ever seen like have able to nearly control Murphy in any capacity was Vinnie Corey, and they had some serious battles across the years. I think Michael Murphy will probably say similar, but how do you mark someone like Michael Murphy? You can't really. Yeah, like, you can control him to an extent and maybe keep him to a score or two mostly, but he was just a powerhouse, and someone who can catch a ball in the air like that and pluck it out of the skies is just impossible to mark.
Good news for the rest of Ulster.
Oh, it's massive news, and that's why it's such a surprise, because he was still able to play at that level.
He's making the point. It's so hard to feel like you're going to be able to do justice yourself, and I totally understand that as well. I'd say if you're the incoming Donegal ticket, you're like, well, we could have definitely put you on for a while. That's 25 minutes on the edge of the square.
Yeah.
Full forward only, no running needed. Honestly, we won't ask you to track back. You don't even need to do one of those tackles. Just
if you're Paddy Carr and Aidan O'Rourke, you're fairly gutted at this news.
That's a bombshell for them, all right.
That is gutting. Like, Donegal trying to prepare for a Division 1 campaign next year and into the Ulster Championship, the heat of battle. Someone needs to step up and replace him. But Donegal have good young forwards coming through. Maybe no one in the mould of Michael Murphy or exactly that type of player, because no one was like him. And as I said, he was generational. He was a powerhouse. Just one of those players that anytime my own county was playing up against him up in Clonus or in a league game, you were concerned, and he was the first name you looked at in the team sheet, the opposition team sheet, because you're like, this is the guy that could win the game. For, like, if he doesn't have a good game, you fancy your chances, and if he has a good game, you're screwed essentially. So what a player.
Yeah, it's 7:49 this morning. Mark Dunning says, as an Arsenal fan, all I want this evening is no injury for Odegaard. Putting club before country.
Oh, good.
The JMac podcast says, morning gents, hope all is well. It's about time Piers Morgan interviewed Michael Murphy, the best Donegal player ever. 2012 All-Ireland final goal, a highlight. And Mark Dunning, as I've already said, he didn't start that night against Kildare. 3 All-Stars. Ulster football is tough. You ain't getting to Croke Park every year, says Danny Mack. It's true. It is true. Like, if you can pad out your stats by, playing Division 4 teams for the first 3 rounds, and then finding yourself already in a Leinster final, say, like some other teams managed to.
Yeah, that sounds pointed by a Kildare man.
It's almost as if the provincial system is completely broken and absolute bullshit, and we never really got the opportunity to see the best of some of the best players in the country.
Yeah. That kind of.
It's almost as if we had an opportunity to fix that, and then just decided, no, we're going to stick with this system because it's what we know and what we like, and we're scared of change.
So should the All-Stars be weighted?
Yeah, every time you play against a Division 1 team, you should get super bonus points, and every time you play a Division 4 team, you get deducted points. Like, you should score 12 points in a game against a Division 4 team if you're like a unstoppable juggernaut, right? Like,
yeah, that's fair.
Well done. Okay, that's par, right?
Yeah.
If you're a free taker, for example, it should be 7 to 9 points is par. You're not getting, but if you score 15, we're like, okay, well, it's 15, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah.
Yeah, and 100%. And I think All-Stars should go to players who make the game look easy, and Murphy made the game look easy. Like, even his gait and the way he ran seemed so laid back, almost like he's moving in slow motion. And then the ball as well, when he's holding the ball in his hands before he takes a free, the ball looks miniature. It looks like a size 3 or size 4 ball.
That's why I'm fairly sure that the LeBron James comparisons didn't start here. I'm fairly sure Keith Duggan was the first person I ever read to make it, but like Owen Sheehan did not agree. But I thought that, like, somebody who is belched onto the national sporting consciousness at the age of 17 and then fulfills everything you're supposed to do and is a community leader and still performs at a very, very high level, maybe, and he's gone out before LeBron did, and not having this like LA Lakers last bit where everybody's like, well, LeBron used to be good, didn't he? We didn't imagine that. So maybe he's doing the right thing. If you've got a view on this, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Only Mitten is going to join us at 9:10 to talk us through the little maze that Manchester United find themselves in at the moment with regards to, Cristiano Ronaldo. The legal perspective on what they're going to be able to do, what they want to do, and who might be interested in taking Cristiano Ronaldo off their hands. Paul Caffrey is going to join us to talk about the other news that happened yesterday, which is the confirmation that Pat Gilroy is involved at some level with the Dublin footballers. Jamie Heaslip has been speaking ahead of the game against Australia. Matt Williams is going to give us some thoughts on both sides about what we can expect from this Australian side, who were absolutely sensational against France, by the way. Don't be lulled into a false sense of security because Italy beat them at the weekend. They were amazing in that game against the French. And that is the show for you this morning. I'm going to run you through what's in the sports pages. Front page of the Examiner, and I think it's kind of appropriate and kind of in keeping with what Shane was saying. No more to give. Donegal Idol Murphy calls it quits. And I don't know what game that is, but it looks like it's an Ulster Championship game. Surrounded by his people, definitely a man of his people. Halland Hole. This isn't anything that you might be with your dirty mind thinking. Missing superstar robs Aviva friendly of Luster. And then there's an interview with Noel Mooney, or talking about how Noel Mooney's going to handle the situation with Wales. Lions rejection is still driving Sexton on. That's the story that's carried in all the papers today. I'll get to it in the Irish Times in just a moment. Back page of the Star this morning. Fergie time for Kenny. Evan Ferguson can rewrite the history books tonight by knocking Robbie Keane off his perch, or against Malta at the weekend. Hurlers tried to coax Lee. Emerging Dublin footballer Lee Gannon has rejected an approach from Micheál Donoghue to join the hurling squad. He was part of the previous setup under Matty Kenny in 2019, but has since become exclusively a footballer at intercounty level anyway. And so it would have been interesting to see if Micheál Donoghue could have coaxed some of those.
And we came into the Dublin panel as well, of course, the year after. Pat Gilroy left, so
the Dubs all feel like they still obviously have a chance of winning All Ireland and stopping Kerry getting a dynasty built up. That's why they're all sticking around instead of joining the hurlers.
Yeah, motivation's there.
Done with that. Murphy calls time on brilliant career. That's him looking fairly pensive, I suspect, after a defeat there. And Eamon McGee, players nearly a decade older, hung on his every word. I think that's the point you were making as well about just the leadership from early on, because he's not a man of many words. But Tony charged over betting. So Ivan Toney says this wasn't the reason he wasn't called into the England squad for Qatar, but he's been charged with 232 alleged breaches of betting rules, and it dates from 2017 to 2011. If found guilty, he can be fined, or if it's more serious, Kieran Trippier, remember, was banned for 10 weeks in December 2020. Wasn't Trippier's like about Trippy was telling his mates about where he was going, and then the mates placed a bet. So
Yeah.
that didn't. I thought Kieran Trippy was, if that was all it was, and that's certainly as far as memory serves, that's what came out at the time. This could be more serious for that. And no way back for Ronaldo. The players at Manchester United have apparently, off the record, said, well, I think it might be difficult for Cristiano to come back and play with us again. Given that, like, you know, stormed off, didn't come on, gave out to everybody, told the whole world he thinks we're pretty shit.
Petulant child. He only has a certain number of friends in that United dressing room, I would say. Like Diogo Dalot, we all know is one of his very good friends. He actually goes to his house for dinner. He's one of the really good friends of Cristiano Ronaldo in that United squad. There's probably others as well, but you see the body language of Bruno Fernandes the other day and you're like, well, there's still players who don't like him.
Yeah, but didn't the story emerge about that? That
that it was about something else.
Yeah, that like, you're a bit slow to get here. You're on the boat, and then
didn't look like that kind of a...
I think you can't judge too much from the changing rooms. I don't
Maybe
think, like, without sound, you know, I think we're reading far too much into. I don't think.
You think so?
I think
that was a Portuguese person trying to play it down because Portugal are at the World Cup, and they're like, they're only talking about flights, and let's not make sure there are no ructions in the Portuguese camp.
Maybe Bruno knows he ain't getting picked at this. Maybe he's not getting picked in every game for Portugal because, like, they have been better when he hasn't been playing over the qualifying group. Now, maybe it's different. Maybe his form is so good you can't leave him out of the team.
Ronaldo's double take and the stare at Bruno and Bruno's little turnaround afterwards, and well, whatever they were saying to each other was frosty, and it would seem quite obvious that would be the first time that Bruno had bumped into Ronaldo since the...
Was it though? Like literally the first time. There's cameras on them the very first second. Were they not at a hotel together before they got to the changing room? Like, what? They're getting straight off planes and going straight to a changing room. We haven't seen each other. There's been no breakfast. There's been no lunch. There's been no dinner. There's been no bus trip. Like, are we sure this is the first time they've seen each other, or it's just like bad hashtag bants in the dressing room? I think that we're
Bruno's quite an honest interviewee. I think he'll have to be asked, and he will be asked.
We're disappearing up our own holes with this, I think, or in danger of it.
I love it though.
Yeah, exactly. So the Irish Times: Lions emission still stoking fires of fiercely competitive Sexton. So Sexton thinks maybe this might not be the end of the World Cup. And you're like, well, I mean, you are playing pretty well. This is not the LeBron James situation. This is a man playing at the absolute peak of his powers.
Why would it be the end? You know, if he continues, as he says, to play like this until the World Cup and gets to play in the World Cup and all is good thereafter, why wouldn't he keep playing?
Was it Andy Dunn or who was it in the aftermath of the game at the weekend was talking about the difference between you're not comparing oranges with oranges, where it's like he's had thousands and thousands and thousands of repetitions. It wasn't Andy Dunn, it was somebody else. It might have been Heaslip to you later on, is it?
Oh yeah, Jamie, yeah. Talking about Sexton.
Yeah, because it was 09 that he comes into the Leinster team, like replacing Felipe Contepomi, who was brilliant, right?
Yeah.
In the final, and like kicks all his goals to win the competition nervously, right? And since then he's been coming up against the best defenders and the best defences in the world, and he's seen these pictures thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times, so that's why he looks so comfortable. It's like there's very little that any defence could do now that he isn't somehow at some point either already seen or gone through in his head going, this is what's going to happen when miraculously a winger suddenly appears out of nowhere to smash me. I'm like, okay, I've seen that. And so, man, I don't know. I mean, it would be like ridiculous if he managed to continue on after the World Cup. It'd be,
and there's so many ifs and buts between now and then. But
well, that's the point.
I still think he could, like, anyone who's surprised by this news, would Sexton really continue? I don't think anyone's really surprised because he's at the level. Is he at the peak of his powers? If he's not far off.
Well, he's just been nominated for World Player of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, he's not far off.
No,
and like, which is quite remarkable at his age. If he keeps playing like this until the World Cup and drives Ireland to a semi-final or final or more, then I think the debate, it's like Ronnie O'Sullivan winning the 7th world title and equaling Hendry. The debate will be over. Johnny Sexton will be going down as Ireland's greatest ever rugby player.
Yeah, and look, whatever, if that drives him, it's in the meantime, obviously Irish rugby needs to do the right thing, and if at any point he falls off a cliff, that's unfortunate, but the way he is going at the moment, it is remarkable. So there's also news that the GA and the GPA are edging towards, because they kicked the can down the road, so this has been a very long, torturous agreement that has yet to be reached between the GA and the GPA, and you know, we were kind of on the verge of strike action last year, it seemed, but those talks are now, it seems, progressing nicely, and I suspect that like they've got the rights deal sorted out. Everybody knows roughly how much commercial income they're going to be making, and so the size of the pie that's being divided is now in sharp relief. Sexton hints at staying on after World Cup. He's not going to stay. Is he? I mean, is this like a okay? If I say this, they might stop asking me about it.
Maybe.
Do you know?
Yeah, maybe
like,
take the attention off it for a bit. But I don't think he's going to be stopped. He's going to be asked this question up until the World Cup. People want to get it out of him. Yeah, I think he can stay. Look, it's Johnny Sexton's decision at the end of the day. But in terms of ability to play, he is more than capable of continuing after the World Cup. So it's just a matter of what he wants to do himself. Has to look after his body, of course. He's got family, so there's a number of decisions. It's not just rugby decisions either.
The Pat Gilroy thing, right? So the direct quotes from Lee Gannon were, there was no mention of a coaching capacity or a mindset capacity, whatever it will be. We don't really know yet, but it's still very exciting. Desi informed us 2 weeks ago that Pat will be joining up with us, so it's really exciting to have another Dublin stalwart back in with us, and hopefully he can just push us on that extra little level. What do you think he's going to do? Because like Mickey Whelan was obviously the coach when Gilroy was in charge the first time, and it seemed like his greatest strength was like, setting discipline, setting standards, and then also bringing the best out of people and letting them all be better versions of themselves, or getting them out of the panel.
Gilroy's probably a man manager more so than Desi Farrell, potentially.
I'd say Desi's pretty good at it too.
Yeah, of course.
But and so, you know, is it performance? Is it kind of the role that's...
I think the mentality role is one that Gilroy would be brilliant at, and it's something that a backroom team member should be focusing on. I mean, the manager,
big enough backroom team.
Well, of course, but it's such an interesting appointment because when we first started, we spoke about it on the show a couple of weeks ago. We were like, this is interesting. Nothing confirmed, obviously yet, but mooted, and it was out there in the waters, but. And then you have to ask yourself, what can a backroom team help you win All Irelands? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. You know, Paddy Tally did it with Tyrone in 2003. He helped them so much. And again with Kerry last year. Backroom teams are massively influential nowadays. You can't really put a number on it. Like how much do they help a team get over the line? But it's a game of inches and small margins. So who knows what difference it could have? I mean, Mannion and McCaffrey coming back in is obviously a bigger deal.
It's a big deal.
Huge deal.
It is a big deal.
Yeah, and I'd just be interested to see how Dublin approach the Division 2 campaign next year. We'll know against Kildare in the opening game how they approach it. Well,
obviously they weren't great against Armagh the opening night last year,
yeah.
and that was the harbinger of doom.
Yeah.
I think they'll be pretty happy to like have 3 or 4 good performances, because next year's championship is going to be completely weird. It's going to be smash and grab once you get out of the provinces, which are like the ultimate dead rubber and completely pointless again next year. So let's wait and see exactly what happens. Such a good character, Neymar. I joke with Messi about beating him in the World Cup final. World exclusive Neymar interview. This is in the Telegraph today, which I'd say you can.
I think when you watch the Ronaldo 9 documentary that we spoke about in the show yesterday, it really makes you lose even more respect for Neymar, because you're like, oh, you're not Ronaldo at all, like whatsoever.
No. Even
character-wise, look, Neymar's a brilliant footballer, but character-wise, Ronaldo just was on a different stratosphere. He's like Neymar. Look, maybe it's a nostalgia bias as well, and a lot of young people nowadays really, really love Neymar as a footballer, but and he's only going to become a cult hero in Brazil if he wins a World Cup. So the pressure's on. I don't think that the pressure is on any country more so this World Cup than it is on Brazil, as usual.
McCluskey to edge out Aki for centre role. This is Cian Tracy's piece about who he thinks is going to be the team for the game at the weekend. He has Hugo Keenan, Mac Hansen, Ringrose and McCluskey in the centre, and Jimmy O'Brien on the wing. So O'Brien's getting in ahead of Balakoon. Sexton is starting with Gibson Park. It's Porter, Sheehan and Furlong, first choice front row. Tyke Byrne and James Ryan, first choice second row. Peter O'Mahony, Josh van der Fleer, Caelan Doris, first choice back row. So there's no, we're going to ease some people in, we're going to give them some game time. It's the last game of the November internationals. We have basically this one and the Six Nations, and then there's a few meaningless World Cup warm-ups, by which it's too late. It's too late. This is like your second last chance to experiment, because we tend not to experiment. Sometimes we do against Scotland. This time we probably won't because they're in our group. We want to smash them and like remind them that this is coming. So that's it. We're locked in. We are locked and loaded.
Yeah, because you forget time wise how far away the World Cup is, but then game wise it's not far at all. You gotta be playing now, don't you? Like if you're not getting into the Andy Farrell reckoning at the minute, you've got a lot of work to do to get into the World Cup team. So be interesting to see. And Australia coming into town as well on a Saturday evening at 8 o'clock. Proper atmosphere. Everyone have been in the boozer all day, no doubt. And the Australians love a little underdog tag as well. Coming and getting a little bit of a scalp. And Ireland at the minute, let's face it, is a scalp in the rugby world. So Australia would only love to come here, Dave Rennie and all, to take us down. I think it'll be a quality game. Like it'll actually be tighter than people think potentially.
I don't think it's going to be one-sided at all.
No.
Obviously Australia worse than I can't. Like if you go back and watch 15 minutes of highlights of the game against France, like France are the best team in the world, and Australia were scoring tries from deep inside their own 22, length of the field stuff.
And Florence was a little bit more concerning possibly for the Australians, but they have so much strength and depth, and the team against Italy wasn't exactly the team that'll play against Ireland either. So I'm looking forward to this one, and the chance for someone to throw the hand up and get themselves involved for the Six Nations.
Ronaldo was just amazed that Bruno stayed on his feet from the contact of a handshake. Cry laughing emoji.
Can't argue with that. I mean, he's had a couple of moments in recent games, Bruno, where I'm like, yeah, I'd say opposition fans hate him. Like I'd say Villa fans hated him that day. He's just hard to watch sometimes. I'm not buying this at all. And again, in the comments, someone pointing out the fact that they were potentially talking about, apparently Bruno was late and Ronaldo said to him, "Did you get here by boat?" Maybe that is what happened, but it didn't look like that was what was said.
I don't know.
I'm not like.
I don't like.
The body language was fairly intense.
Is it never not intense with Ronaldo? Is there ever like a ha I'm joking? I mean, I don't remember. There's like ha I'm laughing, but it's maniac.
But we're hearing that the United players want him out. One of the leaders in that United leadership group is Bruno Fernandes. I'd be shocked if he wasn't one of those people. And Bruno Fernandes, it's in the stats. He doesn't play as well for United when Ronaldo's in the team. He just doesn't. So if anyone wants Ronaldo out of Old Trafford, Bruno Fernandes surely does. He's not mates with him.
No, I don't think they're mates. But at the same time, they're about to go into a World Cup where if everything falls their way, they have a chance, right? Does anybody really want Portugal in a World Cup semi? Maybe you do want Portugal in a World Cup semi-final, but there's loads of players there who could just have the 3 weeks or 4 weeks of their lives and write themselves into history. Like,
but is that not why Bruno's annoyed at him? Because he's bringing so much negative attention to the Portuguese camp.
No, but no one cares in Portugal about Ronaldo having a fight with people.
Players have been asked about it in press conferences for Portugal in the last day or two, which is detracting.
Oh, they were asked questions.
I know, but I mean, it's...
Oh, they're gonna have to answer some things, and then they answer them, and then it's over, and it's like...
Maybe.
I don't know, but maybe footballers are particularly sensitive.
I think they are. I mean, a lot of people want the Ronaldo Messi clash of the Titans in the World Cup final, Portugal Argentina. Remains to be seen if it'll happen, but yeah, and both of them have not really done themselves justice in the last few years. So
the Bruce Robbo fan club comment on our YouTube stream is all body language experts now too. Yeah, we are. Well, I mean, we're not, but the whole point is that it might be a made up science, and so therefore we can all pretend that we are.
True.
I'm just saying, maybe people study long and hard and they know exactly what's going on.
But it looked fairly obvious to me that it was a fairly awkward encounter.
Let's wait and see if they pass the ball to each other now.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, I can't wait. What happens if they get a penalty? Who's going to take the penalties? As we see, it's Ronaldo, right?
Ronaldo, at international level, it's him.
John Claffey says the interview was fairly pathetic, pure fanboy stuff from Morgan. It was like, an interviewing David Clifford. That's shocking. That's shocking.
Someone accused me of that in the Paul Finlay comments as well yesterday. That of course you're going to get accused of that, but I think the opening minutes of the Piers Morgan Ronaldo documentary last night, or interview, whatever you want to call it, really put me off. I watched the first 15 minutes. I think it was 45 minutes in total, maybe last night. But straight away, Piers Morgan's like in his introduction without Ronaldo in the room. Cristiano Ronaldo, in my opinion, the greatest footballer that has ever lived. And then when they're starting the interview, Piers' first question I think was, why now? Why are you doing this interview? And he said, Ronaldo said, well, first of all, Piers, because
I love you, Piers.
I like you. And Piers said,
I love you too.
That's essentially what was said.
What was the body language like there?
It was like full on, like
it's the first time I've ever seen 2 men have sex on the BBC.
it was full on eye contact, lovey-dovey stuff, lots of smiling, Ronaldo licking his lips as he always does, to keep the sheen on his lips so he looks good for the camera. That's my theory about Ronaldo in his interviews.
Wow,
he's constantly licking his lips.
Thought a lot about this.
Yeah. So
wouldn't the body language experts tell you that that's like something shifty there?
I don't know.
I don't know either. So you see, you can make stuff up.
No experts.
Say it like, body language tells me this. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, right.
And he started saying 95% of the press are garbage, and the Portuguese press criticise me, and he seemed shocked that he would be criticised in his homeland of Portugal about anything. I think he's forgetting that pundits, Gary Neville included, these lads, that's their job, to critique, and if they feel Ronaldo's not adding to the team, then
maybe he's going to be the world's greatest pundit as well. It's possible. We're going to talk a bit more about this with Andy Mitten in just a minute, but in the break you're going to hear Shane in conversation with Kevin O'Connor, who's a research scientist at UCD, about how sustainable Ireland is compared to other countries. Off the Ball in partnership with Science Week. Science Week is helping us explore the infinite possibilities that science offers and the role of science in delivering solutions that support our future opportunities and challenges. It takes place from the 13th to the 20th of November. You can find out how to get involved by visiting scienceweek.ie. We're back after the break, as I said, with Andy Mitten's thoughts on the Ronaldo situation.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Koigig Pod on OTB Sports.
We should have played the ball around in the middle a little bit more. We were too quick to drop off 3v1. That's been a problem that we actually stopped against Scotland because Niamh Fahey stepped in to stop Caroline Weir.
Keep up to date with all the WSL action every Tuesday and subscribe to the feed in the OTB Sports app now.
from your perspective, how do you think we as a country in Ireland are developing when it comes to sustainability, and how maybe we compare to other countries?
I think Ireland is still behind the curve. I think we have a long way to go. I don't think it's necessarily down to people. I think often the choices people have in this country don't allow them to live sustainably. Things that are sustainable are more expensive. So that's a challenge. So I do think, so Ireland as a country, I think, we're dependent on our fossil resources. That's the, diesel, the petrol, but also plastics. So part of it is the lack of a choice, but a part of it is also policy. I think there are lots of people in government trying to really drive policy change, which is a good thing. But I think as a country, we're still, we can do better, for sure.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
Andy Mitten, good morning to you. How are you? Good morning. Okay, thanks. Shane says he made it through the first 10 minutes of the interview last night and had to turn off because he was slightly sickened by it. I should point out, in case you're unaware, Shane's a Man United fan. How did you manage to make it through the whole? Is it 45 minutes so far? How much have they published? Have you seen the whole thing?
Yeah, I have. I'd imagine that before Shane got to the 10-minute mark, he would have gone through 3 different sets of adverts. They were certainly padding it all out. I did watch the whole thing. It's my duty to watch the whole thing. I'll be asked about it a lot today. I'm going to write about it today. I think the headlines which preceded it were stronger than any of the content which we saw, which was probably planned by Piers Morgan, by Talk TV, by the Murdoch empire, if you like. My opinion's not really changed from what I was saying a couple of days before the interview to having watched it afterwards. I think the only winners here are Piers Morgan and Rupert Murdoch. I think Cristiano Ronaldo's stock among a lot of Manchester United fans has not been boosted by doing this interview for several reasons. The choice of outlet, what he said, talk about being betrayed, blaming everybody but himself, and the fact that he's not playing that well. It just smacks to me of someone whose ego is struggling to come to terms with the fact that he's no longer the incredibly good player, probably one of the best 2 players in the world that he was.
That's the problem from Ronaldo's perspective, really, here, is that if he'd done this interview at the end of last season, where he was scoring a lot of goals, and you could still make the case that it wasn't necessarily great for the team, that they were completely reliant on a then 36-year-old. But at the same time, if his performance level was off the charts and he was still doing it week in, week out, and he was coming out saying this club's a bit of a shambles, the Glazers haven't invested, the training ground's exactly the same as it was. You know, what's the story here? Why have they not progressed? And also, I didn't get support at a very important moment in my personal life. Then he would have had much more credibility, because the performances haven't matched the level of anger he's got. Then people are going, "Well, you're just a troublemaker now."
Yeah, he's not done it from a position of strength. If he would have talked about the training ground when he came back, he would have been more valid than talking about it now, because actually a lot of money was spent on the training ground in the closed season. And some of the points he made were valid. He came back when he left the club in 2009. Manchester United were world champions. When he came back, United were a long way from that point. But he hasn't done this interview from a position of strength, and I just think he needs someone close to him to say, "Get real. You know, you're not who you were." Manchester United fans are not stupid. They've been watching the games this season. His performances have dropped substantially. His output has, his number of goals has, and he's gone from being a positive influence to a negative influence. He wanted to leave the club in the summer. Manchester United would not have stopped him leaving the club in the summer. United didn't push him out like he suggests. He wanted to leave. The fact that nobody came in for him who could pay the high wages that he's on at Manchester United is not the fault of Manchester United.
What do you make of the timing of it all, Andy? Like, I mean, I know Piers Morgan was asked last week, I think, you know, when this interview was recorded. He wasn't too keen to reveal when exactly that was. I'd imagine it's since he refused to come off the bench against Newcastle that day, but we don't really know. But the timing is interesting.
Yeah, I naively thought after the Fulham game on Sunday that Manchester United wouldn't dominate the news cycle now the World Cup finals were kicking in. But I use the word naive because the public gets what the public wants. Piers Morgan befriended Cristiano Ronaldo because he is a celebrity that he is. He talked about having almost 500 million followers on Instagram, and that stuff resonates with him. And clearly with the player as well. He spoke about that during the interview. From a journalistic perspective, it's kept people busy this week when not a lot is actually happening. So I think it was deliberately planned. I think the choice of platform was wise from Piers Morgan's perspective, but not from Cristiano Ronaldo's perspective. But everyone's been talking about it. He's got this huge scoop, and he's done what he does. Whether it's with Donald Trump or Cristiano Ronaldo, he'll just be sitting back smiling now that people are arguing back and forth whether Cristiano was right or wrong to do it. But among Manchester United fans, and that's who I care mostly about, the reaction has been overwhelmingly negative. And he might talk about they're always there for me, they're great for me. Well, I'm sorry, I've not met many who think it was a good idea for him to say what he said. And I think Erik ten Hag's treated him pretty fairly, actually. He could have been much more harder on him. So to talk about being betrayed by him, I think he's wide of the mark.
That is the sad part here, that there was a legacy of a player who burst onto the global stage at Manchester United, had great times, and then went on to have an amazing career at Real Madrid as well. But that's gone now. That, like, the memories of that, okay, the memories of it will never fade, fair enough. But his relationship with that club and that time in the club's history will always be tarnished as a result of this interview.
Yeah, it's not done it any good. Then again, I've seen countless players leave, and it's almost always unedifying. Very few players choose to do what Erik Cantona did and said, right, I'm going now on my terms. I remember the end of Roy Keane's time, the end of Wayne Rooney's time was pretty testing. And then, you know, Wayne Rooney got a lot of criticism from Manchester United fans before he moved on. And now he's celebrated. And I still think history will remember Cristiano, the footballer, really well at Manchester United. George Best didn't always behave like an angel and was ultimately sacked by the club with good reason. And yet there's a statue of him outside Old Trafford. So football fans in the short term will be pretty hard and critical of Cristiano Ronaldo. And I get that. I actually agree with that. But I think in the long term, when people are asking to recount their greatest ever 11s, he would still make it. it's just a little storm, and it's in a teacup. And I don't actually think Manchester United will be buffeted that much from it, because he's not the best player anymore.
No, and the other thing is, there's only 6 months left in the contract, if I'm right about that. And so therefore, if they have to pay up, they pay up. If they don't have to pay up, they can get something back, or they can sue him. That's for the lawyers to decide ultimately, and it's not going to have a massive impact really on the bottom line. But what actually happens, do you think, or what's your instinct about the process that occurs? Because we were told United were really waiting until the full interview was available to them. Maybe they've already got the full interview. The lawyers, I'm sure, have requested a copy of it, and I'm sure whatever the TV station is would be only too happy to furnish them with it. So what do you think does actually happen now in the technical legal situation with regards to Cristiano Ronaldo, the footballer?
I think United's legal people have to see if he's breached any terms of his contract. As I said, United would have let him go. I don't see why Manchester United should pay up his contract. What have United done wrong here? So if he's trying to force his way out, go. But don't expect your contract, a huge contract, the best paid player in the Premier League, or one of the best two, to be paid up, because I don't think it's fair. I don't think United have acted badly here. And I would be the first to criticise if I felt Manchester United had done, and if the Glazers had acted wrongly. But I think Cristiano Ronaldo is in the wrong here. So I think the legal people will be going through it thinking, can we sack him? Can we get rid of him? And if they can't, well, then he's still got a contract. And everybody says to me, I'll never play for us again. Well, he actually might do. It's unlikely, but people were saying the same thing to me in August when Cristiano was telling people that he was going, but he didn't go because nobody wanted him. You've still got the same issue for him. Someone has still got to come in and say, we want you and we're going to pay you. And he's got to be happy with that and be prepared to move on.
One of the things Cristiano Ronaldo said in the piece last night, Andy, was around the press, and he said, look, I don't read any stories in the newspapers, but he did say, I don't know why the press criticise me, especially the press in Portugal. 90% of them are garbage. And then, you see him kind of shunning some of the Sky pundits at the side of the pitch when any of them dare to criticise him. So on one hand, he's saying he doesn't listen to the criticism, and then on the other hand, he clearly does.
Yeah, I've heard this before, I never read the papers, but, everything that's going on in the papers. When he might talk about online and say 90% of it's rubbish. And there's elements of the journalism trade I'm not going to defend, but there's also some very, very good journalists. There's been a lot of good journalism done on serious subjects, from the issues around the Qatar World Cup to everything, really. I think the scrutiny which public figures are held to account is not a bad thing, and we can do that in a free democracy. With Cristiano saying that even the Portuguese papers are going for me now, as I understand it, that's because he's not been as effective for Portugal as he once was. And he was praised when he played well, and he'll be criticised when he plays badly. He can't have it both ways. If it's pernicious and it goes beyond that, then that is wrong. But the criticism I've seen of him has been from a playing perspective. And he talks about the pundits. Well, they're only saying and articulating what a lot of the fans can see. If someone like Gary Neville or Roy Keane was to say Cristiano was fantastic today when he wasn't, then their own credibility is on the line, just as mine would be. And he seems to object to anybody who criticises him, and yet anyone who praises him, he sends it back the other way. Roy Keane's the best captain I've ever had. I mean, that was probably true as well. But pundits are there to tell the truth. People who've played football can see things through professional eyes. And I don't think there's been any vendetta against Cristiano Ronaldo at all. He scored 2 goals this season against Sheriff from Moldova and one in the league. His statistics have fallen off a cliff. He's been given chances, he's been indulged, he's been given the captaincy. And it was him who walked out of Old Trafford twice this season, nobody else. He made that conscious decision. So if he wants to be seen as an example, who wants people to follow him, what is he suggesting, that young players follow him out the ground before the end of the game? I don't think that's professional either.
Like the transfer window seems to be one of the big bugbears of his, and look, he referenced the transfer window in which he was brought in, and Jadon Sancho and Rafael Varane were brought in as well as, a good window and possibly the start of something good. But he was also quick to point backwards to David Gill, the former chief executive, and name check him and really highlight the fact that the transfer windows since the Ferguson era maybe haven't been what he would have expected.
I think that's a fair comment. Equally, I'd be pushed to find anyone criticising Manchester United's recruitment after that summer where they brought in Varane and Sancho and Cristiano. People were delighted, including myself. Hasn't really worked out with all of them. Varane was injury hit first season, better this. Sancho's not hit the heights expected. Cristiano was good last year, less so this. I think a wider point of Manchester United's recruitment not being as good as it was is absolutely valid. We've seen that. We've seen hundreds of millions squandered on substandard, sub-performing footballers. You could easily argue that they've been brought partly because of the reputation. Lots of them have been on the way down. They've not performed. Huge names like Alexis Sanchez, Bastian Schweinsteiger. There's been a lot of them. United have recruited poorly. Compare that to Liverpool, for example, who have worked on a smaller budget than Manchester United, still managed to win the league, win the Champions League, and have been much smarter. Manchester City, obviously, the way they're funded means that they can recruit smartly anyway, but they have done. Pep Guardiola has got a well-oiled machine there, and that's not a word or term you would use to describe Manchester United in the post-Ferguson era. So Ronaldo's harking back to when all was good. He was on the rise, when David Gill was his boss. He kept using the word president. Manchester United don't have a president. He talked about the chef not even changing. Well, the chef has changed, because I spoke to the chef earlier this year, and he wasn't there when Cristiano was there last time. So there are some inaccuracies in it as well. It's his version of the truth. And in football, there's often more than one version of the truth. But my opinion has not changed, having seen the interview from before seeing it. The
position of Ten Hag is going to be very interesting at the end of this. It feels like it's actually going to be enhanced as long as Ronaldo doesn't come back. I think I understand the vagaries of contract law might prevent them from firing him officially, and so therefore he'll still be on the books. And at some point, maybe down the line, there's a crisis, and they decide, okay, we have a game that we want you to play in. Might not be the Europa League, but those games are going to be big. But there could be a situation where they find themselves in where they have to play him. That wouldn't be great for Ten Hag. But if for example, they decide they're just going to get into the legal battle with his lawyers, and at some point a settlement is made for a portion of the contract or none of the contract or whatever, Ten Hag comes out of this as like somebody who has instilled discipline, stood up to the biggest player in world football with his 500 million Instagram followers, and made the right decision for the club. I think that leaves him in a much stronger position. I don't know if I don't know if it's necessarily played out that way on purpose from Ten Hag, but it certainly feels like he's dealing with the big issues properly.
Yeah, he's made big calls with Ronaldo, with Harry Maguire, when he dropped Luke Shaw earlier on in the season. He's a disciplinarian, and because results have been good, he's getting away with it. People are supporting him. He's still basking in the glow of being a new manager, and every new manager would benefit from a period where fans, are invested in the person, want to believe in that person. But he's had some really big results, beating Liverpool, Arsenal. Performance against Tottenham was fantastic. United are fifth. Fifth isn't overly impressive, but have yet to play a lot of the lower teams. Got a game in hand. Had a terrible start with 2 opening defeats. So it's pointing in the right direction through in the League Cup. Big game against Barcelona to look forward to, albeit with some nerves, because United didn't win that group with Real Sociedad winning it. So I think Ten Hag's on pretty solid ground, and he's the one whose stock is rising and Cristiano's is going the other way. No player can ever be bigger than the club. Ferguson always had that as his mantra, and Ten Hag is showing similar character traits. Cristiano Ronaldo is 37. He's not Manchester United's future. Erik Ten Hag potentially is Manchester United's long-time future manager. and he's got to make the decisions. And I don't think there's anything personal. I've not heard any evidence of that at all. I think he's been pretty fair with every player. And I speak to people at the club every single day. And right from that pre-season, I was getting intelligence, which led me to think, okay, he knows what he's doing here. And there'll be setbacks. There was one against Aston Villa last week, and I wouldn't expect Manchester United to be winning the Premier League this year. But I think he's doing a good job, Erik ten Hag, and I think he's dealt with Cristiano in a fair manner.
Has Alex Ferguson's reputation taken any collateral damage from the fact that Ronaldo's like, yeah, I was about to join City and cause all this trouble there, but then Ferguson intervened and maybe come to Old Trafford instead?
Not really. I mean, Ferguson made mistakes as well. Ferguson's human. And I'd put that more onto Cristiano. So you were prepared to join Manchester City, were you? You couldn't think that through for yourself. Did it take Alex Ferguson to change your mind on that one?
Wouldn't it have been great for Man United if he was there causing all this trouble for Pep Guardiola now, storming off into the World Cup, and maybe they wouldn't even have signed Haaland because he would have scored so many goals for them last year? It's an interesting little sliding doors moment.
We can all do the what about here. What if he'd scored the winning goal in a European Cup final to win Manchester City's first ever Champions League?
Yes, that would not be good.
So, speaking factually, when he signed, I'd say 99% of Manchester United fans were pleased that Cristiano came back. He gave the club a lift, a buzz. The demand for tickets around his debut against Newcastle was the highest it had been since that Real Madrid game, ironically, when Cristiano Ronaldo came back in 2013. So that shows his celebrity. He is huge. In the eyes of some fans, he's bigger than the club. Maybe not fans who actually go to the matches, but a lot of the younger fans, my 8-year-old daughter, Cristiano Ronaldo is probably bigger than Manchester United in her eyes. So there's different demographics here. And I have seen some Manchester United fans defending him because they're basically Cristiano Ronaldo fans. And that's been a relatively new phenomenon where people follow individuals rather than clubs, but it does exist.
Yeah, and I think Erling Haaland probably has the same, and it's one of those things which makes you think Haaland's not going to be at City for much longer than 2 or 3 seasons because he wants to go off and see what it's like to be that player at Real Madrid and to be that player in some other league as well. One last thing before we let you go here. I know you obviously follow Spanish football a lot. What do you think of their World Cup prospects? Is there... because we were talking about Portugal and their prospects, and if everything aligns and they get a little bit of luck, they could cause damage for a team in a quarterfinals and a semi-final, and who the hell knows, maybe Ronaldo at the end of all this is lifting the trophy. We'll see, unlikely, but Spain must fancy their chances, right?
Yeah, Spain are a good team with a very, very good manager in Luis Enrique. I was really impressed with them in the Euros. That semi-final against Italy was probably the best game of football I saw in 2021, and it was a very narrow game. So them small margins that you talk about could easily go in Spain's favour. They've certainly got the quality, they've got the strength in depth, they've got a wise manager. They would benefit from not being the favourites that they were a decade ago when they won those 3 tournaments, Euros, World Cup Euros, 2008, 10 and 12. Emerging talents coming through. You've got very strong links. If you've got that Pedri, Gavi, Busquets midfield, well, they're top of the league for Barcelona in La Liga. It isn't quite Iniesta and Xavi, but Spain is a country which produces world-class footballers up front. They've not got a top number 9, but then they've not been playing with one for a long time. So they use that false 9 idea pretty much before any international team. So yeah, Spain would not be the favourites, but they'd certainly be 1 of 6 capable of winning it. And all of those players are capable of playing in front of the biggest stages. They play for Barcelona, Madrid, or the big Premier League teams. So they've got a really, really good manager as well. I've got a lot of respect for Luis Enrique. I've interviewed him. I've spent an hour and a half in his company and walked away from that thinking, wow, you're a really impressive human. He absolutely knows his stuff. And Spain are in decent shape.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing how they get on. People are texting us about, and Shane in particular thought that there was an issue between Bruno and Ronaldo. Were you buying that, or did you think that was too short? My instinct is that the data is too small. It's incomplete. We don't know what happened before. We don't know what happened after. We can't really hear what they're saying. Shane's insisting that, no, there's something up.
Just looked awkward.
He didn't like it.
I wouldn't read too much into that little awkward. It was awkward interaction. I would read more into the fact that when Cristiano was asked to talk about the best Manchester United players, he omitted Bruno. So he talked about Diogo Dalot. Again,
fair point.
Someone who talks up to him, and he didn't include Bruno in that. So there's definitely some professional tension, jealousy, call it what you like there. Teammates don't have to be best mates. And when I was a kid, I used to think that all the Man United players hung around together, went out socialising together. Actually, in the 80s, most of them did, and that's why they didn't win the league title. But it's completely changed now, but they're not best mates.
Good stuff, Andy. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers.
That's Andy Mitten there. He said he was writing about that later on, so stay tuned. Follow him on social. Make sure you read his further thoughts. It's 8:35 this morning. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Or you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Fergie brought the Glazers in basically with a falling out over a horse with McManus. So he's the root cause of all your success and current troubles, says Chris. He's clearly not a United fan, but I mean, it's true. He's telling the truth.
Yeah.
And it's like the Glazers saw a window that opened because
there are still Ronaldo super fans here.
There was a debate about a horse.
There was, and that's what caused it. But yeah, well,
it wasn't. It actually wasn't the horse. It was horse semen.
Okay, yeah. Rock of Gibraltar semen at 8:36 on the Thursday morning. Good topic. But I mean, I'm listening to what Andy's saying, and like the mad thing is, ordinarily this week we'd be talking about Alejandro Garnacho, and nobody is. We're talking more about a mural being pulled down off Old Trafford yesterday.
That's good for Garnacho, I think.
The expectations low.
Yeah, or like the hype, and either that or he's like, I'm the new Ronaldo, yay! You know,
he seems like that type of kid with an ego, a Ronaldo-esque ego. Hopefully,
certainly the subtext of some of the comments about his attitude coming through.
Yeah, and when you take off your jersey in celebration and hold up your name, I mean that was the quintessential egotistical celebration. But I think fans were loving it. But yeah, it's taking a sheen off it, and you can read into everything. You can read into the Bruno stuff. You can read into the mural being pulled down off Old Trafford's a massive Ronaldo mural pulled down yesterday. But reality is we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But I'd be shocked if he played for United again. If he does, I would be intrigued to see the reaction of the fans.
Something would have to happen, you know. But like I do think that it's a legal situation now where they'll make the case that he is in breach of contract because he's like slandered the reputation, said their current manager doesn't respect him, says he's no respect for the current manager. You know, tick tick tick. All my lawyers are like building this thing, and then his lawyers are like, it's in the contract. It's not the definition doesn't quite say. And then they come to a deal, and it's like, okay, we'll give you $100,000 a week for the rest of your contract. Away you go. And they're like, yeah, okay, grant, but you're free to sign with somebody else.
Fair. I think everyone would be happy with that. Just let him go off into the sunset and cause trouble elsewhere.
Right.
At this stage.
It's 8:38. The bombshell news that Michael Murphy was retiring from intercounty Gaelic football slightly overshadowed the other big news that was confirmed yesterday when Lee Gannon did press to confirm that Pat Gilroy is now again part of the Dublin backroom team. Paul Caffrey, the former Dublin manager, is with us. Paul, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, Jared. How are you?
This had kind of been rumbling around the ether for the last month and a half, and I think in fairness, Pat Nolan was the first person to put it to print in the Mirror last week, or maybe 10 days ago at this stage, and then it was officially confirmed by Lee Gannon, or semi-officially confirmed, that Pat Gilroy's back in. But we don't know what he's going to do. What do you think he's going to do?
Yeah, look, the first thing you'd have to say, I think it's great news from a Dublin fan point perspective. Pat obviously still has the enthusiasm and the want and the desire to get back involved with Dublin. I probably think that like Pat took over after me, changed things around, did a fantastic job, won the All-Ireland in 2011. Would be disappointed, I would think, with their exit in 2012 against Mayo in a semi-final, and then stepped down. But look, he had laid the huge builder blocks, the stones for what happened over the next 7-8 years. Dublin gone on to win 6 of the next 8 All-Irelands. So it was phenomenal stuff in terms of what happens. He obviously threw his hat in with the hurlers for a while. business commitments didn't let him stay at that for too long. But once a guy has a desire and that ability and that esteem, and Pat would be, talking to the players over the years, like they would have really liked Pat in terms of his style, his no-nonsense style, what he brought to the table. And then, look, I would think from Desi's perspective, there would have been sort of a lot of soul searching, like betting the last 2 semi-finals, and he might have come to the realisation himself that, look, maybe he needed to shake things up at the top table and bring in other people. And this seems to be the way with the new modern management teams, that, it's always about surrounding yourself with the best people. And if Pat was available and willing to come on board, well, I think his CV is right up there. And I think himself and Desi are obviously long-time mates, having soldiered together in '95 to win an All-Ireland. They would have been in contact, I would think, all the time over the years. And I think it's a really good move for Dublin. What exactly his role would be, Ger, I don't know. And maybe it's not the only change that the players will see come 2023. Like, you look at the brave move that Jack O'Connor made, bringing in Paddy Talley, someone from outside, just to freshen things up, and the reward that Kerry got from that. So it wouldn't shock me to see somebody else being added to the ticket further down the line. But I would think that, look, Pat will bring a vast amount of experience, knowledge, and know-how. And obviously, look, a hugely successful businessman. And himself and Desi, a fresh pair of eyes and ears on the scene. It can only be good news for Dublin. Add that into the fact with Jack Mack and Paul Mannion declared themselves available for 2023. I think it's been a good few weeks for Dublin GA.
Yeah, it is like a superhero movie where, while Kerry are off celebrating and on their team holiday and picking up their Player of the Year gongs and doing the tour around the schools, the Dubs are like in the gym and the Rocky music is blaring.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of these guys, you take the Brian Fentons and Kieran Kilkennys, and they're really only used to winning dressing rooms for so long, and then maybe a bit of hurt has come into it. James McCarthy's getting married at the end of December. A lot of people might have thought, well, it'd be hard for James and Mick Fitz and even Johnny Cooper to soldier on. It might be time for them to dust down and go back to the clubs and into retirement or whatever. But no, there's a very defined message there that, look, the hurt that maybe it finally was not so much Tyrone beating Mayo 2 years ago, but maybe Kerry this year coming and sticking their chests out and saying we're back. And that might be just the final bit of hurt that this group needed to say, let's shake it up here. Let's roll it out for one more year. And if Desi sees that he's going to improve the top table and the players feel that they have a little bit more to give, I think Dublin could be a dangerous animal this year. I know the bookies have tightened it in the last couple of weeks, and really it's Dublin and Kerry at the top, and then it's the rest a good bit down the field. So I just think it's made 2023 a little bit more interesting.
We've been talking a little bit about egos on the show this morning, Pillar, and like, I guess for some managers being the head man, then coming back in as someone in the back room will be tough to do. But then we've seen a lot of it in recent years. Stephen Rochford comes to mind as someone who went in with Donegal, and Liam Sheedy was even in with the Monaghan footballers. It seems to be a more common thing, and clearly something that Pat is quite up for.
Yeah, and look, I don't think in terms of ego and in terms of, if you surround yourself with quality people, as manager, your job is to listen to them and draw out of them what you can. Okay, somebody has the final say at the end of the day, but the more expertise you have around the top table, I think it'll only benefit. And I don't think people are saying, how can Pat come back and him having been manager or whatever. Pat will easily slide back in there, and without assuming the role of banisher, he'll still have a huge say in what's going on there, and he'll add value to the whole ticket. And I think that everybody will be quite comfortable with that. I think the players will be excited about it, and Desi has obviously thought this through and said, this is going to help Dublin be a better team in 2023, and let's go for it. And I'd imagine there have been lots of meetings between Desi and Pat and maybe the rest of the extended management team to see how the best fit is going forward and how to facilitate this. And As I said, it wouldn't shock me now to see that maybe there might be somebody else added to the actual training ticket. And that's where it's at. You see Kevin Walsh being announced to come down to Cork to give a dig out there. And this is what it is. If you can get somebody who is, and Pat would have the expertise of, taking a team and moulding them and getting them over the line and seeing the hurt that comes from losing semi-finals, which these guys now have in the dressing room, and then shaping that, and Desi has his All-Ireland senior title under his belt in the 2020 Christmas All-Ireland, and Desi has invested an awful lot into this group with his minor days and 21 days, and I think Desi would feel himself that there's unfinished business, and I think it's a great line from Desi in terms of, he's leaving no stone unturned, and it's a big move by Desi and a brave move by Desi, and I think it would benefit Dublin.
I think he deserves a lot of credit for it, because on the other side of the ego thing, people wondered about Pat and him parking his ego to the point where he's going to not be the main man, and that's not usual for him at all. But from Desi's perspective, it's like, I do think that we can be better by bringing people on board, and it kind of gets rid of all of the conversation around Desi from some of the Dublin fans, a small minority who are like, he only took Pillar's team, he only took Jim Gavin's team and won the All-Ireland with that. Like, he has literally, as you say, left no stone unturned, and it shows an absence of ego on his part that he wants the greater good.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a very valid point, and I would give massive credit to Desi for being big enough and honest enough to say, look, hang on, this is about improving Dublin, and this is about, can Dublin win the All-Ireland in 2023? They're down Division 2, they will get a chance to rebuild and blood players, and I think with Jack Mack and Paul Mannion coming back into the fray, all of a sudden, instead of the little bit of doom that was settling around, and Kerry are back in, and they'll probably do 3 or 4 in a row, and maybe the next pretenders or next contenders are Galway, if they keep building or whatever, that maybe Dublin are going to slip away nice and quietly now after being so dominant for the last 10 years. All of a sudden now there's a little pep in the step again, and say, you know what, this is a brave, bold move by Desi Farrell. It's to be applauded, and why wouldn't you want Pat Gilroy to come on board in any capacity to improve things?
You mentioned there that you wouldn't be surprised if there was further additions being made to the backroom team. Do you think it's possible somebody from outside the county might join, or is that off the agenda?
I would think probably off the agenda. I think, like even in my years, you're all the time looking to see, is there somebody outside that will add value? I brought in the likes of Ski Wade as defensive coach, Kieran Duff as a forwards coach. So you are looking to add to your ticket in terms of, you're the manager, and I had selectors in Paul Clark and Davy Billins and Brian Talty, but you do have the remit, you do have the permission to add whatever way you like and see fit in terms of adding to your ticket, and I just think that's part of the evolution of management, and particularly now you're always looking for, is there somebody else out there that can add value? And there's guys that have retired recently that stay involved. Butchie Daly was back involved there. Kevin McMenan was back involved. So Desi is obviously evolving this and building and getting guys back involved. That's why you don't see them as frontliners. They're behind the scenes doing the work. So I think this is still could be a change in picture going forward, and there still could be adjustments. But it's exciting. It's exciting for Dublin fans. It's exciting for Dublin football, and I think it's exciting for the 2023 championship. Dublin and Kerry aren't going to meet in the National League, so we're not going to have that visual early in the year, and we have the prospect of that happening later in 2023 in the championship.
Yeah, it's going to build the tension if we can delay it for as long as possible, and then hopefully get it a couple of times. That would be ideal scenario. I did want to ask you about Michael Murphy and his retirement before we wrap this up here. Murphy's career, from the very second he arrived as a senior footballer, he was heralded as a kind of saviour of Donegal football, and he delivered the whole way through, which is very, very difficult in a county that had been as starved of success as Donegal were, for him to hit the heady heights and carry the burden of being captain and best player into every single game, basically from the time he was 18 to the last game he retired after.
Yeah, look, Jerry, it's right to acknowledge, one of the greats of the game, Michael Murphy, and like when you talk about Pat Gilroy and Desi Park and their egos, and like what a humble guy. Anybody who's ever met Michael Murphy or been in his company, like what a humble guy he is. I remember when they were in college, he was up in DCU and going up to see a freshers final. So they were first year college, and it was the big talk of Dublin. There was going to be a great game up in DCU. It was DCU were playing, and Michael Murphy was obviously playing full forward, and Aidan O'Shea was playing for his college. I think he was DIT.
Yeah.
So it was this big game, a massive crowd up in DCU on a winter's November day or whatever, and it actually turned out it was a strong breeze, as there often is this time of the year, and the two of them ended up marking each other at midfield. And like what a tussle, but there was only one winner, and it was the Donegal man. And I think from that day on, us people in Dublin looking in were saying, right, this guy is really special. This guy is really, really special. Then, he got Donegal to an All-Ireland under 21 All-Ireland final down Breffley Park. They played the Dubs. Jimmy McGuinness was manager of that 21 team, and Jim Gavin was manager of the Dublin team. And fantastic game it was up there. And James McCarthy would have been playing for Dublin that day, and a host of other fellas that went on to do great things. But Donegal got a penalty near the end of the game, and Michael Murphy stepped up and he cracked it off the crossbar and hit it so hard that it came out beyond 30 yards and was cleared, and Dublin won the game by a point or two. I remember looking at him on the pitch after. He was absolutely devastated. And he was still only a kid at this stage. And then, as you rightly say, look, week in, week out, he turned up for Donegal. He turned up anytime I went to see DCU playing. He was phenomenal. He was never ordinary when you'd see him playing. He was just phenomenal. I remember the 2006 All-Ireland final, they bet Mayo, and the game was just over after 10 minutes. Michael Murphy had just turned it on inside and full forward. Mayo had no answer, and Donegal had laid the foundations, and it just absolutely, it was a pleasure watching him, and like what a career, 15 years. I know he struggled in the last year or two with injuries, and look, that's what happened when you put in that groundwork of hard work, and like he was, his list of achievements, like between Sigerson and 5 Ulster titles and his All-Irelands, and as you said, being the talisman captain for so long of Donegal, and expected and delivering to be the best player every time he went out for him. So we won't see the likes of him again, and to do it, in a period where Donegal we're up and down, we're striving, we're winning Ulster titles, we're getting knocked out, we're like, he just a fantastic career that he had for and what he gave, and best of luck to him. And he's definitely a guy you'll see in management in the future. I think he's dipped his toe already in the colleges, Sigerson scene, and you can imagine him being much sought after further down the road.
It's a terrible question to ask anyone, Pillar, but like in terms of the greatest Donegal footballers of all time, and you'll have remembered that class of '92 as well up in Donegal. Yeah. But where does he rank, do you think?
For me, he's number one. You know what I mean? I go back to remember Seamus Bonner being brilliant 14 for Donegal, and then look at that class of '92 and McHugh and these boys that were brilliant on that. But no, look at the. And he played with some great footballers himself, but no, for me, there was none better than Michael Murphy that ever wore the Donegal jersey.
Paul, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers. Good luck, lads.
It's former Dublin manager Peter Caffrey giving us his thoughts on the news that Pat Gilroy is back with the Dubs, and also on the end of Michael Murphy's inter-county career. It's 8:54 this morning. OTB AM is obviously brought to you each morning in association with Movember Effortless Shave Magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at movember.com. And I did just want to remind you that I have a couple of comments to get through here first before I do anything else. Sorry about that.
We had one straight in. Noel Cahill, he's back in on YouTube. Why is Shane calling him Bruno personal friend? I think I had a similar comment the other day that I was calling Bruno, so I must be
instead of Bruno Fernandes.
Instead of Bruno Fernandes.
Well, life is short. Part of our accelerated culture. Why would you not use shorthand?
Exactly. Save the syllables. I mean, Jesus. Some people are recognisable by the one. I think Bruno is maybe one of those.
You got to get him down to BF.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean we're mates. No, it doesn't mean we're mates. It just means it's easier to say. Simple as that.
Right. A reminder that Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of OTB. Whether you're travelling for work in the morning or training in the evening, Braeburn will give you the boost you need. It's available at Apple Green locations nationwide, and each week we're giving one lucky viewer a €100 voucher to spend on some Braeburn coffee goodness at an Apple Green store near you. To enter, check out @OffTheBall on Twitter, like and retweet our Braeburn competition post, and you will be in the draw. Now, the Ireland game this weekend is going to be available on Amazon Prime. Jamie Heaslip is part of the commentary team for Amazon Prime, where all of the Autumn Nations Series games are available to stream, and Shane has been chatting to him about the game against Australia. Have a look.
All right, well, Jamie Heaslip is part of a new Prime Video team who have exclusive rights to all Autumn International Series games in Ireland and co-exclusive rights to Ireland's games with Virgin Media. Delighted to say Jamie Heaslip joins us on the line now on OTB AM. Morning, Jamie. How are things?
I'm good. How are you?
Keeping well, man. Keeping well. We decided we'd take a bit of a look ahead to the final November International this weekend against the Australians. I was interested to read Jerry Thorney in the papers this week talking about Australia's inconsistency. They've had the poor result, of course, against the Italians last weekend, but always a dangerous prospect to come up at this time of year against the Australians, Jimmy.
Yeah. Look, Australia are a good side. They've had some quality players, but yeah, consistency has been an issue for them. But I think in a very strange way, not that we don't have to worry about Australia. We should really be focusing, pay our respect to them, do our analysis of them, but really at the level that we're now at and the mindset that we probably have to have coming into the next 10 months, we have to be confident that we can beat them, and we have to be confident that we can execute on the day. But when we look back over the last couple of games, I think we have to look at our own consistency. While we have beaten all the top tier sides so far, where we've come a little bit unstuck is against those kind of top marauding sides. Obviously, we kind of got over that hump against South Africa, but then our consistency last week in terms of approach to the game, was a bit underwhelming, and it's something that we have to kind of work on and improve on, and be a lot more ruthless this week against Australia, who will be bouncing back off a tough all day in the office last week.
Is there any concern whatsoever over, when Johnny Sexton's not on the pitch? And I know Carberry did his work last weekend, but and then there's talk of Jack Crowley maybe coming into a team as well, maybe off the bench if Sexton is fit. But are there any concerns when Johnny's not on the pitch that there are those gaps and even gaps in experience as well?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I was trying to look back, and while we're chatting here, I'm trying to pull up those stats that, in terms of we win a whole lot. The effect that Johnny has on us winning in a game is pretty dramatic. My stats from last week's notes aren't top of mind, and I will circle back on it. But the impact he has on the team in terms of direction, in terms of commanding a presence, in terms of taking opportunity, as well as not just going through. I think the letdown with Joey last week is that he went through the process a little bit too much. You know what I mean? This is the plan. We're executing the plan, even though at one stage, two scrums jump out at me last week. I think they were around R22. They had. I think they were down to either 13 or 14 men. I can't remember at the time, but there was no blindside flanker. The blindside winger was about 20 metres back. And it was screaming out for them to attack that short side. Worst case, you kick it down the field and you got a one-on-one sprint with Balakoon against someone else, which you'd back all day. But we went through the process no matter what. And with Sexton, I think he probably sees that space. Maybe not the first time, but if he sees it the second time, he goes for it. Or he tells the guys go for it. And I think he has that commanding presence, and we win a whole lot more games with him on the field. The numbers don't lie around that. I think Crowley took his opportunity last week. Joey's had he's down in Munster over 4 years now playing at 10. I know he's had a lot of injuries, but anytime he's gone up against big opposition, and notably kind of Australia, I think it was 2018 against Australia. I think it was France this year when he starts at 10. We've lost. So, people keep saying, Johnny's getting older, but, I think Johnny plays as long as Johnny is number one. You know what I mean? And until anyone else steps up to the plate, the gap right now is still pretty big. And I think right now, the one who's starting to bubble up and potentially come into that like second or third choice, I think there's a lot of potential in Crowley.
That was one of the things, and it struck me from Andy Farrell, in build-up to the game. He stressed the need for these, secondary players, if we'll call them that, or the wider squad to step up to the mark in recent weeks. And then you look at the Fiji game and, 25 minutes with a man extra and a further 10 minutes with two men extra essentially on the pitch. And really Ireland made hard work of that for large swathes of that match.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it, you just even look how disappointed Andy was after the game. I think, I think everyone who watched the game saw how disappointed it was in terms of the amount of territory we had, amount of possession we had, and the lack of return on it. And this very kind of like, what was really disappointing was actually as well, I remember twice we scored a try, and then from the kickoff, we kind of switch off and we give an easy entry point, an easy penalty to Fiji. And these moments, that it's fine against Fiji because we're always going to beat them, right? But we have to stop playing at the level of the opposition and playing at our level. And I think that's what was probably most disappointing last week, that we weren't at the level, that Ireland wasn't at the level that it normally is. And we had a lot of penalties, a lot of silly errors. And that's going to be quite disappointing. And a lot of guys didn't do themselves any favours in terms of the pecking order, while some others took their opportunity. Treadwell stands out, McCluskey stands out, Crowley stands out in terms of my head of last week of guys who took their chance. And we do need to build that depth. I think we have a strong depth in the pack, and it's building. You could maybe argue there's a little bit of gap with some of the front row positions, but that's starting to build. We have a good depth at 9, and I'd love to see Casey be on the bench this weekend for it. I think he's been hard done by, maybe not been on the bench a little bit earlier. 10, there's a bit of a gap, but like in terms of centre partnerships, we're seeing that building. It's unfortunate Robbie Henshaw's injured and stuff, and Gary Ringrose will probably play his I think it's his 8th game in a row or something like that. But the depth is starting to build, which is good. But if you let me fast forward for 10 months' time, people keep talking about us getting past this quarterfinal, which is a bit of a hurdle, right? To do that, we have to play South Africa, Scotland, and then Australia, and then New Zealand or France, right? And that's 3 massive tests in a row. And we need you've seen, like, you watched the game enough, you see how many guys get banged up from these international tests, such as the intensity, and to do it 3 weeks on the trot, like we need to be able to slot 15 guys in and out, no problem starting. And there's just in some positions there's I don't know if we can do that like for like, but we're definitely getting a lot more parity and kind of level standard amongst all the positions across the squad. It's getting there. I don't think it's there yet, and there'll probably be a couple of late bolters, but yeah, we're getting there
slowly but surely. Like, how's the back row depth chart looking for you at the moment? Because you mentioned a few of the top performers against Fiji in what was a dogged enough match, but Nick Timoney really put up his hand, and I think he said afterwards, had I not shown up, it might have been my last game for Ireland. He was really putting himself under severe pressure, but really he's proved himself a fairly able deputy when Van der Fleer's not on.
Oh yeah, and there's actually, there's not a whole lot out and out sevens right now. Will Connors is still kind of coming back as well. I think Timoney really put his hands up, and he showed that he can get through a vast amount. He was another one, that obviously put his hand up, and he got through a vast amount of work. And I was really impressed with him, and he's an out and out 7. But he also, what will probably play to his strength is that he's pretty comfortable flexing across the entire back row. And for guys, I'm not saying Nick isn't a starter, but I'm just saying for guys who aren't, let's say, if you and I were to sit down and kind of scribble out the start of 15 here, obviously there's a couple of guys who jump onto the page straight away. for the guys who don't make that starting 15, you know, to get into a World Cup squad, you need a lot of flexibility, and they're the guys who are really going to add a lot of value. And I think Timothy, in that regard, does that. Someone else who has really kind of started to kind of grow now they're getting a little bit more time, I suppose, is Max Deegan. I think, you know, I look, you know, Max and Caelan were kind of coming up together, right? And I kind of look and say, this is going to sound like Max is probably the most naturally gifted, athletic back row I've seen in a long time. You know, but I think he had to learn that, you know, the grind and the process that it takes to be consistent at the top level. And I think Caelan is you know, a highly gifted footballer as well, but who took the chance and probably you know, he took the chance a little bit earlier than Max, took it a little bit later to kind of learn how to go about it. But having people like Max coming into their fore in this kind of cycle is really interesting in terms of the dynamic that brings to the back row, right? Because he's very dynamic. He can play. He's showing that he can play six. Ryan Baird as well as another one who can play six and second row. And that just adds to the headaches for Andy Farrell and Paul O'Connell. Good headaches, you know, because you have established players there like Jack Conan, Caelan, like we mentioned, Josh Van der Veer, Peter O'Mahony, these type of guys. And I think it's the way our team is now and the way Ireland play now, it's not good enough to be kind of a specialist in one thing anymore, and particularly in the back row. I think you have to be very good at that, like, role specific job description, let's call it, but also be a really, really good generalist in terms of, you know, your passing skills, your line out skills, your poaching skills, your tackling skills, your carrying skills, because of the width and the speed and the way that Ireland played our game. And the more ball carriers, the more ball players, the more line-out options we have on the pitch, the more dangerous we are in terms of to defend. So when it comes to the back row, you know, that's one place we are not lacking in depth.
For sure. And we mentioned Josh Van der Veer and the incredible 12 months he has had. Like we saw the World Rugby Player of the Year nominations come out this week, and himself and Johnny Sexton both up for the top gong. And look, I know, you're someone who's been nominated for that very award on a couple of occasions yourself, so you know how great an achievement it is. But is it one of those achievements that you can only reflect? It's like the All-Stars in Gaelic football and hurling. You can only reflect once you're retired and maybe appreciate it, or is it something at the time where you're like, okay, this is pretty cool?
Look, I think you'll always say it's pretty cool. It's nice to be nominated. Okay. Because of the people that are part of that panel putting together, most of them are former players, and you know, it's kind of a nice recognition, I suppose, and it shows you the level that you are at, which is kind of reaffirming in terms of you know, you're putting in a lot of work and you're getting some sort of kind of validation, I suppose, for it. But the real validation any of these guys care about is trophies. Like, you know, you can get nice awards, but like at the end of the year, you're really looking at like, what trophies are in the cabinet, what medals do you have at home. I don't think you're really caring about anything else. And you know, you look at Ireland, they haven't won anything since 2018. And I think Johnny made a couple of comments there last week about that, you know, that they have to win things and be used to being favourites, for example, and going into a competition favourites and dominating it. They have to win trophies, and that's what they really care about. It's really cool for them. I think I've said this, I think Johnny Sexton is probably the best player Ireland have ever had. You know, in terms of trophies won, in terms of winning World Player of the Year in the modern professional era, really. I know Keith Wood won it, but that was like at the start of the professional era. This is like, you know, over the last 15 years, And Johnny's been, I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the third time Johnny's been nominated?
I'm fairly sure. Let me see. He's certainly looking to become the first player, or one of the players, certainly one of the only players from here to become the first to win it multiple times. So, like, I mean. Yeah. When you look at the record, even at least he has been recognised, which I guess is important, because
he's world class. So, like, just I mean, and he's getting better. You know, he's looking after himself more off the field. Not that he didn't, but, you know, he's always trying to improve on that. Yeah, investing in himself. He's growing and has grown substantially as a leader. Since he's kind of came back from France, you know, and the years, you know, following that, and Stuart Lancaster bringing him through on that, and then just the way he views the game. And I think that's the thing people forget. Like, you know, you've got to realise, you know, Johnny came through. Johnny had to fight to come through, right? Like, he had to fight Contaponi to get the spot. And he didn't get the nod from Contaponi until Felipe got injured in the semi-final. I think, was it semi-final or the final? Sorry, or semi-final. It was semi-final against Munster in 2009. And then he kicked on. Then he had to fight Raj to get through, and then so he's been there since, like, you know, 2010, 2011, and has, like, he's been at the top level. The pictures that he's seen in real time, in real match conditions. He's seen it for like 10 years at the highest level, and that's why it all looks so natural for him in terms of, like, how he controls the game, I think. And a lot of people forget that. They're trying to compare like with like in terms of the young gun coming through and versus someone who's seen those pictures for 10 years. And I think, you know, that kind of experience, and he keeps his body in good shape. It's a very dangerous combo to go up against, but it's great. And especially for Josh as well, by the way. Josh is one of the nicest people I think I've ever met in my life. Off the field, absolute pro, always looking to get better. Real good way and mannerism about him. And I remember Johnny even talking about him, and even when I played with Josh, it's like, the reason you love playing with Josh is because you knew he was going to do his job 100% of the time. Yeah. Like, you look at him play, like, he very, very rarely makes a mistake. He'll always know the game plan. He'll always know his role. He'll make the right decision, you know, 9 times out of 10. And you do not have to worry about him. And, you know, he'll get through a massive, particularly if you're playing in the back row and you have him as your 7, he'll get through a massive amount of work that potentially releases you a little bit more to have a bit more of a rolling role, depending on who the 6 and the 8 are. But Josh does take a huge amount of work off the plate.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a year, 12 months he's had for Ireland and Leinster. Yeah. Jamie, great stuff. Finally, score prediction for the weekend, Ireland Australia, Saturday 8 p.m.
I won't give you a score prediction because I haven't looked enough at it. But I think Ireland Ireland should win comfortably. I think such is the level that we are at. But, you know, on any given day, you never know. But I think we are going to have a fairly strong side with, you know, 1 or 2 interesting people potentially on the bench. Some interesting calls from Andy. So that's what I'm more interested to see the squad that Andy picks for this game rather than the actual game itself. So that's what's going to be most interesting for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully another big performance on the way. Jamie, great stuff as always. Thanks a million.
No worries. Take
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Off the ball.
It's not okay for him to be fine in a test match like that. It's a fulcrum position where everything runs through 9 and 10. You don't get to be fine in matches like that where you start.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
13 minutes past 9 this morning. You're very welcome if you've just joined us. You can catch everything we've already done on youtube.com/off the ball. Or of course, you can get it on the podcast network. Just hit subscribe to our various podcast feeds and we'll have stuff ready for you every day, multiple times. Now, I'm delighted to say Matt Williams is with us. Matt, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Joe. Very good, mate. Looking forward to the weekend.
I think that we might be underestimating the challenge here. I saw a good part, the good first half of the France-Australia game. I thought Australia were amazing. Like, they were kind of a little bit like the Michael Cheika era Leinster, where they get the ball under their own post, and the next thing, it's the far corner. They've run the length of the field, and they've scored some of the most amazing tries you've seen against France, who are the best team in the world. So I know Italy beat them, but I'm expecting more of the team that played against France than the team against Italy. Is that fair?
Joe, I hope you're right, but I honestly don't know, and the trouble is neither do they. If you look at their form over the season, since in the South it starts in June, beat England, lost to England, beat South Africa, lost to South Africa, beat Argentina, lost to Argentina, should have beaten New Zealand, except for an outrageous refereeing decision, and then lost to New Zealand. So and so far on the tour, beat Scotland, should have lost to France and Italy, and they should have won. So they are just, and this has been Australia for the last 3 years, especially their ill discipline, their penalties, their yellow cards. They've led the world pretty much, certainly led the Rugby Championship in the number of infringements that they've given away. And you just cannot tell from week to week how they'll turn up. And you were dead right. They were quite magnificent against the best team in the world. I think there's another trend we have to look at here, Ger, in the bigger picture, that is everyone is doing this. Argentina beats England, then they lose to Wales. Argentina beats New Zealand, but they can't beat South Africa. Ireland beats South Africa. Australia beats South Africa. You know, everyone in the top 10 seems to be capable of beating each other on any given day. That is very, very unusual. As a matter of fact, I was talking with an old mate. We can't remember that being the case in our lifetimes. Some of that is the quality of the players and the closeness, but it's also that officials are having such a big play in the game, the penalties, scrum penalties and so on, which are really changing the face of games very, very quickly. So in a nutshell, at the Aviva on Saturday, I'm not sure, but I think Australia are capable of winning. There's no doubt about that. Whether they turn up like they did in the Stade de France is the big question.
It'd be really important for Ireland to see how they cope against that type of attack, the kind of all action, because we've now seen that, okay, we've learned a lot over the last couple of years, and we know we have a plan for dealing with that version of South Africa that we saw. It'd be great for us to see what we would do against this version of Australia if we were to come up against a side who play like this in the World Cup. And let's face it, there aren't that many of them. But one of the things that happened after the 2015 World Cup was, we got beaten by Argentina because we had loads of players who were injured and the Sean O'Brien suspension in that quarter-final. But I remember afterwards, I think Ronan O'Gara and both Andy Dunn were like, well, I'm not sure our defence would have stood up against them anyway, even if we'd had our full team, because the style of play was completely different, and actually Argentina were brilliant. We kind of had this, we can deal with this because, or we would have dealt with it if we'd had our best players. So, like, getting different challenges and testing yourself against different styles of play is exactly what you want at this time in the World Cup cycle.
Well, absolutely, Joe. I think, it's really what you're alluding to that. I think we go back a little bit. Ireland, my 20 years, more than 20 years now, dealing with Irish rugby, they've been in denial about Irish rugby has been in denial about their performances at World Cups for 20 years, and they've never really addressed it until now. And Andy Farrell deserves a lot of credit for the way he has addressed that, starting last November in the radical changes he brought to the selection and the playing policy of the team, and the way he has selected the team so far this season. I think it has been a breath of fresh air is not the right summation. It has been clinical and calculated in planning for a World Cup, in something that Ireland has failed to do. And because the country had so much faith in Joe Schmidt, that led them down a path to the 2019 World Cup, where it was quite obvious to outsiders that Ireland were just not up to it, but within Ireland no one saw that. And now, Andy Farrell, to his great credit, has acknowledged that, has seen it, and has changed. So that's the first thing. So Ireland are on track. Second part of that is what the Wallabies are doing is returning to their DNA. The way they're playing is Australian rugby. That's the way we were brought up. It's the way we play. It's being who we are as Australian rugby players. I remember I took a drop goal at Coogee Oval one day and it went over and I got booed. You got booed. If you kicked the ball, you got booed. You got called a coward. And that's what they were calling. We went back and we got a point ahead and they're calling you scared, aren't you? You're scared. I thought, oh, it wasn't a great drop goal, but it wasn't that bad. You know? But that's the attitude you're brought up with. That's the way we played. And we went away from that. We started trying to be New Zealand. And no, you can't be someone else. You've got to be yourself. And this is why, again, come back to Andy Farrell. The philosophy that Andy Farrell is following with the national team is Ireland. It's creative, it's expansive, it's positive. That reflects the national character. And Australia returning to that. And all power to them. I'm really proud of the way they're playing. They're not a great team, and I don't think they're capable of doing too much at the World Cup. But you can't accuse them of not giving everything they have, and they are. And if you coach a team like that, you've got to be proud of them. And you can see that up and down performance means that this isn't a classic Wallaby side. But if they get it right on the day, the way they play, they can disrupt anyone in the world, as they proved at the Stade de France. You're right, this is great for Ireland. It's great to test themselves. But here's the other part of it. Ireland are red-hot favourites. Ireland are red-hot favourites for this game, and Australia are underdogs. And Ireland have to adapt to that. They have to go to World Cups being favourites and win. They didn't do that in Japan. They lost to Japan. And that cost them so much. You talk about the same thing with Argentina. They should have beaten Argentina that day. And I reject all other statements about injuries and so on. That's part of World Cups. You've got to deal with that. And great teams that go on deal with injuries to key players and move forward. So this is a really good test for Ireland, because Ireland have got to be sitting back in their hotel in their planning rooms with the coaching staff saying, we're not sure which gold team's going to turn up here. We're not sure if it's going to be the one in the Stade de France or the one in Sydney that were horrible against South Africa after the week before they were brilliant against South Africa and Adelaide. So no one knows. So that's going to put pressure back on Ireland, and that is a really healthy thing in their progression towards the World Cup. And the last bit of that, Ger, I'm not just saying this because of my accent. I really want Ireland to win at the next World Cup. I really do. A loss won't do, between now and the next World Cup, won't do Ireland any harm. And a loss in a tournament that means nothing, the November internationals means nothing, wouldn't be the worst thing. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Ireland will win. But I'm just saying that all of this is adding up to the process of getting to lifting the William Webb Ellis Trophy in October next year. That's what this whole process is about.
On the Wallabies, Matt, when you talk about the Australian character, and I guess another aspect of Australian character when it comes to any sport is they want to win. And there's been talk of Dave Rennie wanting his contract to be extended. Now, if they were to lose to Ireland on Saturday night and then lose to Wales the following week, you're looking at a win percentage this year of less than 29%, which is very poor for an Australian team. Now, it's 10 months out from a World Cup, and maybe there aren't any obvious replacements for Dave Rennie. Is that what's essentially keeping the conversation away from his job? The fact that, if they were to lose to Ireland and Wales, it doesn't look good in 10 months away from a World Cup.
Shane, I really respect the question. I'm not being disrespectful to the question. Problems with Australian rugby have nothing to do with our national coach. Problems in Australian rugby are deeply systemic and have been put in place by shocking administrative decisions over 20 years. Since we made the final of the World Cup against England in 2003, they had 40 million in the bank. They've gone to bankruptcy last year, the very, very brink of bankruptcy last year. The numbers in the men's 15-a-side game have ruptured. The quality of our coaching has deteriorated up until the last 18 months, 2 years. There's been some changes. But all of that, every national coach depends on the system below them. And Australian rugby has been on the deck, on the floor, knocked out. Now, we've got some good administrators, some good people come in the pandemic. The pandemic was a bit of a purifier, if you like. It put a blaze through the organisation and killed off some of the stuff that needed to be killed off. And what's left behind, they're building on. And Dave Rennie, in my opinion, has done a great job. He's brought in a number of good Australian coaches, and Dave's a New Zealander. He's handled himself magnificently, unlike other New Zealanders that have come into the Australian system, where they basically just tried to make us another province of New Zealand, and that just doesn't work. They've also done a lot of work on trying to re-establish club rugby in Sydney, and the numbers coming to the games to watch and play are better. But we are just off the deck. We're nowhere near, Australian rugby is nowhere near the powerhouse it was 20 years ago when I left, 22 years ago when I left. And that's been really hard for me to watch. And constantly, all along that process, no one is pointing the finger or looking at what needs to be done, which is long-term strategies to rebuild the game financially, technically, the coaching of our players at a very young age. I'm talking at 15, 16, 18. I'm not talking about at professional level, sub-professional level, which is what Ireland have done so brilliantly in the last 20 years. What Ireland have completely changed since I arrived in 99 is how they educate their young players. So they're arriving at the professional level, really rounded and well-educated players. You only have to look across the Australian out-halves and their age bracket to see what's occurred. So you've got a Foley, Quade Cooper and a Connor all in their early to mid-30s. So that means it's 18 years ago when they were getting coached as 15-year-olds. And what's happened since then? It's fallen off a cliff. And that's the problem. So the Australian media constantly, it's the coach, it's the coach, it's the coach. So the coach is leading, Australia are leading France with 40 seconds to go, a minute to go. That's not the coach, that's the players. Australia are leading New Zealand with a few seconds to go. That's not the coach, that's the players. And it's the decision-making process of the players. I certainly hope Dave stays. I think there's some really good young Australian coaches coming through. And again, they wouldn't select and develop young Australian coaches for years. They brought in New Zealanders. I wouldn't have had the life I had if Australian rugby didn't give me a go and didn't appoint me as an assistant coach to some really wonderful coaches who mentored me, who taught me, who gave me their knowledge, passed on their intergenerational knowledge to me, and gave me the opportunity to do what I've done. Now, that was stopped for 15 years. They were not given young Australian guys who had done their yards at club level and so on, like you've got to do, giving them the opportunity to show what they had. And we're paying the price, just as Ireland is reaping the rewards for what they've done. So, you have to look. I always say international rugby teams are like breweries. It's like you got to grow the hops, and you've got to have good water, and you've got to have smart people that blend it and make it together. Then be patient while it all brews up and it comes through, and then you get a good pint. Like that pint's taken a long time to happen. It's the same with international teams. If you don't coach kids well and you don't have a strong system, sub-international and sub-professional, your professional team eventually is going to suffer, and that's what we're seeing with Australian rugby.
You mentioned there about defeat not being a disaster for Ireland. It clearly isn't. This game is not going to be something that, unless something cataclysmic happens, we're not going to talk about this game beyond the next couple of weeks. Unless he kind of goes for a left field selection and somebody gets a cap. But the probable teams in the papers, which are generally very well informed, suggests first choice pack, first choice half-back partnership. McCluskey's going to get an opportunity. Jimmy O'Brien's going to get an opportunity. But everybody else is as it was. So we're going locked and loaded for this game. And they're weighing up the balance between continuing the momentum of winning versus giving somebody new the opportunity to become a bolter. We were talking about this earlier on. The first fixture in the World Cup, Ireland, Romania, Bordeaux, the 9th of September. We've one more game after this, really, where we might think experimentation is fair, and that's the Italy game in the Six Nations. After that, nothing else matters in terms of we test somebody in the test environment and we see what that's gone. That window's gone after this game this weekend. So we'll know next October if it was the right decision to pick the full team for this game. But now in this moment, what do you think is the right decision from an Ireland perspective?
Full team, absolutely full team. That's why they had the A program, Ger. That's why Andy Farrell's really put a lot of effort in that A program. They've coached the A teams. They've given them a lot. They've given them quality games. Now it's going through, and let me tell you, Italy are 5 from 6 with Wales and Australia under their belt. The work that Steve Aboud did, people don't know Steve Aboud's a fabulous Irish coach, went to Italy, set up an incredible academy system, probably the best academy system I've ever seen at international level. But again, that's taken 5 or 6 years for those players to come through the system. So they're now part of the national team and they're winning. So Italy are no longer, I believe, the pushovers that they were for far too long in the Six Nations. I definitely think that you could carry 1 or 2 players. Like I think the selection that we'll see there on Saturday, as you say, the papers are usually pretty right because the national team leak it to them, keep all the journos on side, so that I think that's a good selection. This is, and again, what is Andy Farrell seeing? This is an Australian team that's beaten Argentina, beaten South Africa, and should have beaten New Zealand and France. So they're not to be trifled with. They're not to be trifled with. And it's also a great opportunity for this team to learn what it's like to come out being favourites. So I think it's definitely you've got to go with your number one team through this and just see how it goes. Because the next part of that is if you put in weaker players and against an Australian team, what do you actually gain? The only thing you can gain is put some of these guys on the bench and bring them on. But I don't agree with that. I think Australia is a team that deserves respect of a full national side, and I think that's what they'll do, and I do think that's the right thing.
Matt, the news this week emerged that Andy Friend is to leave Connacht at the end of the season. I know he's someone you're very close to. I'm right in saying you would have kind of worked with him at the Waratahs in the 90s. Like, this is a guy who has done seriously good things for Connacht since he came on board in 2018. He'll be missed big time from Irish rugby.
Yeah, look, Andy's a great bloke. I had a beer with him last Six Nations, and like he'd sort of indicated to me that he was going to finish this year. He's got family. He's grown up children back in Australia, and he's been on, like me. He's been on the road a long time, and I think he's looking forward to getting home and being closer to his kids. So, look, Andy's a great person. Number one, I started him out. We came on with me when we were at the Waratahs we were trying to figure out the year. We think it was 98. We're pretty certain it was 90, but we worked together at the Australian Institute of Sport before that as what they call satellite coach. So I've known him for a long, long time. Fabulous person. Again, a man brought up the same as me, running rugby, get the ball in hand. This is how you do it. The quality of his person, of his character has rubbed off on that Connacht organisation. Yeah, he'll be missed, but he's going to leave a legacy there, and that legacy will be built on. And the season's not over for Andy, but I think he's got a little camper van. He's looking to travel around Europe in there and enjoy a little bit of the sights of Europe before he heads back to Canberra. But he's had a great career and will leave Connacht in really good stead.
I presume in Australia he'll get a job in rugby as well, that the experience that he's garnered in this part of the world will stand him in good stead on his CV?
Look, one, I don't know if Andy wants that. We didn't talk about that, so possibly. But it's also really hard to go back to where you've been. Once I was Waratah coach, I knew that was over, and Sydney's my home, so there's only one professional team in Sydney, and Andy's been Brumbies coach, so it's really hard to go back into an organisation where you've been. And I was at the Waratahs for 10 years, and I think Andy on and off was at the Brums for 8 or so. It's a tough one. Whether you go back into an academy system or do something like that, I don't know if he wants to do that. But look, Australian rugby would be very, very silly to not utilise his experience. Australian rugby's done some really dumb things in the last 20 years, mate, I can tell you. And they've thrown away so much intergenerational coaching knowledge. It's just heartbreaking. So I don't know on every front, but would he be a great asset within a system there? 100%. 100%. I always say coaches are at their best after 5 or 6 contracts because you've made all your mistakes. You've done all the dumb things. But that's when you usually get pumped out the other end and they bring in a young guy who's going to make all the same mistakes that you just made on the way through, instead of having bringing back in that intergenerational knowledge. And that's what I meant. When I was coming through, we were still amateurs. So we had guys, you know, I had Bob Templeton, who'd been the Wallaby coach in the 70s, Dave Brockhoff, Wallaby coach in the 70s, Bob Dwyer won a World Cup in 91, you know, John Conley, great Queensland coach, went on to be a Wallaby coach. These were all guys I worked for and were mentors of mine that passed on that knowledge you can only get by being in the trenches. And they'd come and watch your games and talk to you and ask you questions. And, you know, it's quite humbling because you had to admit your failures, but that's what you've got to do. You've got to stare your failures right in the eye, embrace them, love them, learn from them, and keep going and have a lifelong love of learning. And that is one of the big reasons that Australian coaches haven't come through, because they haven't had a mentoring system that we had, that even though it was informal, that we had. So someone like Andy going back into it would be absolutely wonderful. But again, I don't know that he wants to do that. You know, it takes its toll on you, and he may want to step right away from it and just enjoy being part of the family. I'm not sure. But again, that is a problem with Australian rugby that we are seeing. Now, having said all these things with Australian rugby, I do believe things are changing in Australia. We have very, very good chairman, a very good CEO. We've appointed some really good young Australian coaches to the Waratahs, in particular, Darren Coleman, another guy I worked with many years ago. Darren's done a fantastic job rebuilding them up. Dan McKellar's assistant coach with the Wallabies ran the Brumbies. Stephen Larkham gone back into the Brums. You know, there's a lot of pluses going on in Australia, but we're coming from a long way down, and there has to be a lot of work done sub-professional level. That's where the real work needs to be done. And we haven't got a lot of resources to put into that, because the financials, you know, Irish rugby made $5 million. Australian rugby was close to bankrupt 12 months ago. So it's a very, very different scenario in Australia to what it is here in Ireland.
Matt, enjoy the game this weekend. Great to have you with us. Thanks.
Looking forward to it, guys. See you now.
It's Matt Williams there. Always interesting range of different thoughts. I think Andy Friend's legacy is cemented in Connacht. Like, oversaw the transition and the recovery from the previous regime, and just gave him this sense of ambition.
Like the things he's done, he's just changed the way, and even the academy and the players he's given debuts to, was it 50 odd players he's given debuts to? That's his legacy. Like, there's a lot of young players there in the Connacht system at the minute that are going to be like, yeah, Andy Friend gave me that chance. So hopefully some of those emerge onto the international scene in the coming years as well. So what a legacy he's left behind. Big miss.
OTB AM brought to you live with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Here's what we got on OTB Sports Radio for you today. OTB Gold at 1 o'clock is Jason Sherlock. Our leaders' questions with Stuart Lancaster at 3. Our retro panel, How Far Does Doping Go?, is 4 o'clock, and OTB Gold is the Wexford 1956 team. You follow OTB across all our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for all the best and latest sports content. On the show tomorrow, Shane's in the hot seat. The 42's Gavin Cooney, a special co-host before he heads off to Qatar. Alan Quinlan will be here as always with build up to Ireland against Australia and plenty more besides. We'll leave you tonight with the Argentinian view from Marcela Mora y Arrojo, talking to Joe last night about whether Leo Messi will finally be able to guide Argentina to World Cup glory.
Now we are very much continuing our build up to the World Cup. So Argentina, third in the world rankings. They are on a 35 game unbeaten run, which leaves them too short of the Italian record of 37 games. So 35 games unbeaten. The Guardian says of Argentina, this is the first time Argentina arrive at a World Cup in peace. There is team spirit. There is hard work. They are a well-oiled machine, apparently. So for more, very happy to say, the always brilliant Marcela Mora y Arrojo joins us on the line from Argentina. Hi, Marcela.
Hello there. Hi.
So if the Guardian are right here, I suspect they are, then Argentine football is in rude health. Never before have they arrived at a World Cup in such a state of confidence and peace about their setup.
Well, I think it's true. Argentina are in a good place at the moment, the national squad, not the country. And there's a lot of enthusiasm. I have to say, in 2002, Argentina arrived in peak condition with a massive stretch of unbeaten games, great record, first in the group to qualify, and it was absolutely disastrous. Argentina left after 3 games. the earliest exit in God knows how long. And it wasn't due to anything going desperately wrong at the World Cup itself. In Russia, the last World Cup 2018, it was a disaster, and you could see that everything was imploding and the team were a mess and the Football Association was a mess and everything was incredibly difficult. But in 2002, there was harmony. We had the best manager in the world, Marcelo Bielsa. The players were ready, and it just didn't happen. And I think that's something one should hold as a possibility, because Argentina is so enthusiastic at the moment. The country's completely geared up. And I think anything that, it's just not a given. There's so much scope for tremendous disappointment. Even though it is true that this is the best psychic, anemic, in terms of spirit and football-wise, that the squad has been in a very long time. They're high on the Copa America win, and they are a good team. They gelled. There's been a little bit of worry with injury, Lo Celso not being there, but there's other players, and there's always other players that can fulfill. Everyone's ready, and Messi is at his prime, without a doubt. So, a lot is given. A lot of the conditions are there.
What could go wrong? So if we jump back to 2018 for a second. So Jorge Sampaoli's tenure comes to a very dispiriting end, as you've referenced. Last 16 exit in Russia. And then Lionel Scaloni, who is still the manager, he was an assistant to Sampaoli. He took over very much on an interim basis. I don't think he'd ever been the main manager of a team before at club level, or certainly not international level. And it was very much supposed to be an interim arrangement. And yet here he is 4 years later. So I suspect he has surprised even himself at this stage. Marcella, what did he do that has proved so successful?
Well, it's a really lovely story, actually, of football growth. First of all, Lionel Scaloni is a low-profile, non-kind of confrontational figure. And he had, as the 2018 project crumbled, Scaloni had built quite a good rapport with a lot of the players. He stayed on, in theory, as the manager of the youth international squad, and then was asked to step in for just in a kind of interim measure for a couple of games. And he was working already with Pablo Aimar, who is another fantastic character in the kind of the cast of Argentinian football, elite football men. We've got some really, really good characters at the moment. Both Scaloni and Aimar had been, as youth players, trained by Jose Peckerman, who was the true revolutionizer of the Argentinian youth system. And Scaloni says when they offered him to manage the first team, Pablo Aimar said, "You're mad, you can't do that." And he said, "Well, it's just a couple of games." But they had this working rapport with the players, so it wasn't like a completely new novice. Maradona was given the national team when he had very little managing experience, in a kind of bang and bluster of exorbitant showmanship. This was literally just an interim thing, and they worked well. And then the thing he did, which I think has been quite wise, was started to work with the players who were in Argentina or who were less known, younger players, and no Messi. And so he built a team that was, comfortable without this presence of some kind of superhuman, celebrity. But I have to say, hands up, there was a lot of criticism when Scaloni was first appointed, and I was among the people who were going, "This is just nonsense. We're never going to be serious again." And so he just calmly worked through that. He then appointed Walter Samuel and Roberto Ayala, who are also legends of yesteryear. really good each at their position. Samuel's training the defenders, and they work really well. And then when Messi stepped in, there was already this well-oiled machine. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I do believe it very strongly. Messi only functions as part of a system, a cooperative system. He can't be the single guy that does it alone. So, then, there's a couple of documentaries and behind the scenes kind of compilations with the whole squad now doing the rounds on various platforms. And there's just so much anecdote there about how the young players wouldn't be scared off by Messi and just knocked on his bedroom door with a mate and a pack of cards, and how they all just did, then they had the experience of Copa America, which was the truly bonding and confidence boosting, because that really is Argentina's first major international trophy in decades. And also it seems to have lifted enormous pressure off Messi. I think I heard a journalist saying he was carrying a really heavy rucksack, and ironically the rucksack got lighter once you put the cup inside it. So I think that's a rather lovely image.
Something very wise on Scaloni's part to get the base in working order before introducing Messi, because I dare say Messi's mood probably affected by whether or not things are going well around him, especially when he's travelling all the way back to Argentina. And the Copa America win, as he lifted that trophy, it did look like you mentioned a bonding moment. It certainly looked like a bonding moment for him and the Argentinian public. And I don't know how many times the point has been made that there has been a slight standoffishness between Messi and the Argentinian public, certainly for a player of his great ability. And now as he heads into his 5th World Cup and having, lifted their first trophy in 28 years, I dare say he's never been more popular in Argentina.
Exactly that. I think it's really fascinating, and I'm not sure it's possible to explain exactly why or how. Even before the Copa America win, there was an enormous amount of the Argentinian football-loving public even, that loved him anyway. A lot of when he resigned in a huff in 2016 after missing a penalty in a final, a lot of voices were going like, we don't care, we don't need a trophy, we love you anyway, come back. And he did come back, and in fact the project of the entire Argentinian Football Association and structure and industry was to lure Messi back. But something's shifted with this group, and it's also coincided with him leaving Barcelona and with Maradona dying. And I think in some ways, Maradona dying did kind of clear the way. I'm not saying Messi wanted him to die or anything like that, but somehow he is now the only living legend, as it were. And the Barcelona to Paris shift was really significant too, I think, because we thought of him as a one-man club who performed for that club and for nowhere else and no one else. And so in a way, I think Messi had some liberations, the symbolic, metaphoric liberation from Diego physically present, and the real kind of labor workman man who chooses his future liberation of stepping out of Barcelona. But I wouldn't underestimate the excellence of the team around him and the players and the methodology that Scaloni and co, who are known as the Scaloneta in Argentina, the project is the Scaloneta, have also played in this glorious moment, which I really hope lasts until next week.
Yeah, I'm sure. Such interesting observations. I hadn't considered what Maradona's passing might mean for Messi as the only living legend. And then the Barcelona point, I'm sure you're so right about that as well, because Argentinians must have looked at Messi, who was swept away to Barcelona as a child, and suspected that his true love was Barcelona, whereas now they're the one constant.
Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, and no doubt column inches will be devoted to it. But he does seem very well in himself, very at peace with his Argentinianness, which had been questioned for so many years, and very confident in a leader way on the pitch, which I think again, is slightly new. This confident, assertive Messi that isn't shy or introverted or whatever it is he was. So it should bode well. There's a lovely clip which is from one of these programs of him enthusing the squad in the Copa America final and just saying, what they have to play for. And it's so interesting because his language use is so odd, and he kind of he says, think about your families, think about the sacrifice we've put in here. We've been 45 days cooped up. Dibu Martinez had a baby he hasn't met. It's just a little bit more now and we can do it. And among the things he lists as incredibly emotionally bonding signs of good karma is we haven't complained about the flights or the hotels at any point. And I thought that was really fascinating, because one of the reasons why he resigned in 2016 was, he had been vociferously complaining that the things weren't booked properly, that they got to the wrong place, that the times were wrong. And clearly that's something that really matters to him. He's such a kind of ordered, organized person. Obviously, if a plane is delayed or the booking is wrong or the hotel is, doesn't have the facilities they thought, it puts him off his game. And I thought I was quite fascinated by that, actually. I think it tells us a lot about how his mind works.
Well, he and Roy Keane should sit down for a conversation sometime, Marcella. That's all I'll say. I see Argentina, for all their riches up front, Messi and Di Maria and Lautaro Martinez will lead the line. He scored 9 goals for Inter this season. I have seen pieces as well noting that they have conceded just 2 goals in 14, and somebody like Christian Romero of Spurs has come in and partnered Otamendi at centre back, and so there is a sense that this is not a lopsided team. They don't have to score 4 to win a game. So what do you suspect is a likely finish for Argentina at this World Cup, which is so impossible to predict given the paucity of games between European and South American opposition over the last couple of years?
Well, I think that's something to bear in mind, really. We haven't seen South American teams advancing to the latter stages for a while, and certainly in Russia it was entirely European. It was like a glorified Euro Cup towards the end of the World Cup. There was no non-European squads there. So we need to see how long-standing that difference in competitiveness is going to be. I don't know if South America is having a bad moment historically, or if it's just reduced its kind of impact on the world stage as its own power within FIFA has diminished, or what it is that's going on. Certainly a lot of these players are playing competitively in Europe all the time, and I don't just mean Argentinians, South Americans generally. So they should be up to playing against the people they face week in, week out. Also, though, it's worth, I think, highlighting that the World Cup is full of surprises. As I say, in 2002, Argentina arrived first and hailed as favourites and left first, and it's happened before. Colombia in '94 were favourites of their region and left before anyone else. So at any point this can end. I think we're all expecting very much Argentina to remain past the group stages, and that, speculating, is it going to be France? Is it going to be who we're facing? But I wouldn't say it's a given that Europe is going to pose the tough competition. I think it's more likely to happen that we see a giant of world football go home early because of some, narrative that happened, a little drama that just, VAR completely shifts a lot of our expectations. the game that goes to penalties, who knows? Personally, I'm preparing myself for a full month's work. I want us to be there until the bitter end, like we were in Brazil, which was actually completely unexpected.
This is probably too complicated a question to answer in one answer, but I'll put you under pressure anyway. The place of the football team in Argentina, as opposed to, I don't know, the dark days of the 70s where that World Cup was going on against a dreadful backdrop for that win, and then 86 and Maradona, it felt like just the most important thing to Argentinian people from afar. In 2022, is the football team as central to identity, and is it the big topic always?
So, by way of an anecdotal example, my brother and his mates the other day went out into the streets asking random people, what would you rather, the country doing well economically and the social situation stabilising, or Argentina winning the World Cup? It's worth pointing out this country is at its worst economic point in decades. We are facing hyperinflation. Things are really like at bursting point, and people said we want to win the World Cup with incredibly brilliant remarks like, well, the country doing well, the economy, how long can that last? The cup's forever. And to my utter astonishment, one of the ministers of work and finance on television said just yesterday or the day before, we don't need to worry about the inflation now. We can, the only important thing now is to win the World Cup. So you have the government saying it and the people in the street. There isn't yet a World Cup fever. I mean, there's lots of advertising, there's of course, a lot of, media attention, but you don't get the sense that it's quite kicked off yet. But the first game is at 7 a.m. on a school day, and all state schools have already written to parents saying, we're starting late, so don't worry about coming in the morning. I think we still have that kind of sense that this is the most important thing. And there's obviously also people who go, thank God it's the World Cup because I'm going to go shopping. There's no one anywhere.
Yeah.
I can catch up on my reading or whatever. But I think it's still very much there. Argentina loves football in a way that very many football-loving nations love football. So a lot of people have a first and everlasting love for their club. And then we get swept up in the frenzy of the national furor. But, it's not... If they don't play well, if things go wrong, if it's like 2018, then people do switch off and condemn and criticise.
Yeah.
It's not but yeah.
And I mean, that is the magic of the World Cup. Like growing up, the thought that the kids in Argentina are off school today and will be off school tomorrow, and fever has gripped everyone for 1 month is kind of one of the rare uncomplicated joys, I think. However, this World Cup is very complicated. To what extent have the issues in Qatar, be they social or the treatment of migrant workers, been to the fore of the conversation? Here, I would say it has overshadowed the build-up to the World Cup massively. I don't know to what extent that's true in Argentina. We don't have a team participating, so it may well be different.
No, I think it has. Not quite with the intensity as I saw in the UK. I came here, a week ago, and I think the US and European media are really all guns blazing, and the toxicity of a lot of the accusations level at Qatar is quite it's quite extreme in a way. Argentina is
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo.